want to welcome you all to the March meeting of the Board of Regents. Before we start with any official business this morning, we have the pleasure of swearing in our newly appointed Regent members so they can participate in the LATTA meeting. Before we do that, I want to acknowledge Senator Morris is here from Monroe as well, where our new Regent member comes from as well. So I want to thank you for being with us, Senator. And it's my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Misti Cordell of Monroe. Misti is a physician liaison for Affinity Health Group and previously served as an account executive for St. Francis Hospital in Monroe. In addition to her work in the medical field, she is the owner and operator of an interior design firm, as evidenced by her excellent taste in what she's wearing today. She is a graduate of Louisiana Tech University, holding a bachelor's degree in human resource management. Regent Cordell, we are so glad you're here, and ask for Bree Golden here to administer your oath of office. Regent Cordell, congratulations, and at your leisure today, please sign the oath of office at your desk and return it to Doreen before you leave today. So, good morning, everyone. We want to get started with our meetings, beginning with the LATTA meeting. Members, remember that we are being streamed live, so you'll need to turn your microphones on when you're recognized and speak closely and directly in the microphone so our virtual audience can hear you. Commissioner Reed, will you please call the LATTA meeting to order?
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I'd like to call the LATTA meeting to order. Rhonda, good morning. Will you call the roll?
Good morning. Dr. Reed?
Here.
Regent Aubrey?
Here.
Regent Cordell? Here. Regent Creed?
Here.
Regent DeVete?
Here.
Senator Fields? Regent Finley? Here. Regent Gill? Here. Mr. Broussard? Here. Regent Levy? Here. Regent May? Regent Meyer?
Present.
Regent Pryor? Here. Regent Seal? Regent Solomon?
Present.
Regent Sterling? Here. Regent Temple? Regent Weil? Here. And Regent Williams-Brown? Here. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now move to item 3, public comment. Rhonda, are there public comments?
There are no public comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. Hearing none, we'll move on to item 4. Members, you've received a copy of the minutes from the January 23rd, 2024 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Samuel Gill. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Any opposition? Motion passes. Okay, now we'll move to consent item 5. Dr. Boutte, please proceed.
Yes. Good morning. Regents, these are final rules that you've already seen from the initial rulemaking process. This first one is for the ABLE program. This clarifies what happens when an account owner or beneficiary dies with the refund, any refunds in those accounts. The second consent agenda item implements the acts of the legislature with respect to open meeting laws, and that is Act 393. And the final consent agenda item is to to implement into rule the interest rates for the principal protection. And for START, these interest rates are set by the treasurer, so there isn't really an approval of this. There is a requirement that these be codified in rule each year. The LASPA Advisory Board, as well as the Louisiana Able Account Advisory Council, they've all reviewed each of these consent agenda items, and they recommend approval.
Thank you so much. You've heard the recommendations from Dr. Boutte. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items? There's a motion and a second. Any questions, discussion? Any opposition? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Dr. Boutte, is there any other business to come before the committee?
No, ma'am.
All right, hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So, second.
Motion and a second. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Members, I am sure you've seen the great news that Louisiana has been recently awarded a $160 million National Science Foundation Engines grant. We are so excited to have members of the research team leading the future use of energy in Louisiana project with us today to explain this project and what it means in our significance to the state and our nation. Presenting this item are LSU Associate Vice President for Innovation and Ecosystem Development, Andrew Mass, and LSU Vice President for Research and Economic Development, Dr. Robert Twilley, and LSU Professor of Mechanical Engineering and our own Associate Commissioner for Sponsored Programs, Research and Development at the Board of Regents, Dr. Michael Consari. Welcome, congratulations on this award. Please proceed.
Wonderful. It's great to be here with everybody. As was mentioned, I'm Andy Moss. I'm the Associate Vice President for Research, and I have colleagues with me, Mike Consari from LSU and the Board of Regents. I also have LumCon represented here, our team at LSU, including Judith Rhodes, part of our evaluation team, and Jason Boudreau, part of our innovation team. I have Daniela Menerdi from Louisiana Tech, Patrick Mensa from Southern, and our team from Louisiana Technical and Community College system represented here. This was a large collective operation to bring together this proposal. And $160 million is a big deal when
Yes.
you're talking about National Science Foundation funding. It's the largest ever National Science Foundation grant awarded in a single stroke of the pen. And the purpose of the funding is to focus on R&D, so research and development in the energy space, workforce development in the energy space, and technology commercialization in the energy space. Our region of service is the entire state of Louisiana. NSF really wanted us to centralize that down to sort of what we would call the industrial corridor on the south side of the state. And we pushed back really hard to say, no, this has to be a statewide initiative. The only way this works is if this is a statewide initiative for the state of Louisiana. Here's an eye chart of all of our partners, the universities, the community colleges, the government, the community organizations, industry, capital partners that have all come together within the planning process. So how did this happen? This started back in 2022 when the CHIPS and Science Act at the federal government was passed. The CHIPS and Science Act then led us to put in a proposal, a white page paper that competed with over 700 other proposals. We were invited to submit. We ultimately worked through the process. As you can see here, we received a site visit in August of 2023 where NSF sent 13 experts to sort of evaluate and determine whether this was real. And every one of those individuals that came said they didn't understand the importance that Louisiana plays in the national energy ecosystem. The reason our federal government is making this investment is because Louisiana is critical to energy independence, energy security for our country. And we finally made the full announcement in January, as was mentioned. I did get notified in October that we were getting the award, and I was told that I couldn't tell anyone. And so that's how these things happen, and we've been working in the background to make it a big splash when we finally did get the go-ahead to announce it. Here's a quick video that sort of outlines exactly what this project covers.
We have an opportunity now as a collective body to ensure that new energy and traditional energy are foundational in our economy, and that we will be able to compete not just in the U.S., but across the world in the energy domain.
Through this funding opportunity for the National Science Foundation, we will continue to develop the technologies and the talent to lead the future energy needs of this nation, and while doing that, providing jobs and opportunities for people in our communities. LSU is one of the few land-grant universities located right in the middle of the lower Mississippi River Delta in an energy corridor between Baton Rouge and New Orleans that has for a long history served the nation. This positions us as a university with our partner universities and our private and non-for-profit partnerships to continue to be the leaders of the nation in energy development, talent, and technologies.
This was a collective endeavor by industry, community colleges, universities, economic development organizations, and everybody came together with one mission and one initiative aligned for the state of Louisiana, while adding jobs in the state, while adding research capabilities in the state, and while adding technology advancements here in the state to benefit the state of Louisiana. So while LSU was the lead organization, this was a collective effort, as I mentioned, across the state of all of our partners. And everyone often asks, why is this so critical for Louisiana to take the lead on this? This is a diagram showing a DOE report, Department of Energy, Federal Department of Energy, identifying CO2 pipeline capacity by 2050. This is what they are anticipating is needed for CO2 pipelines in our country. The green highlighted is how the capability of our subsurface geology to store CO2. This is a hot political topic, obviously, but we have the geology that's right in Louisiana. And it centers around Louisiana, as you can see. When we have our state and you look at the subsurface geology, here is the subsurface geology and the capability of storing gases underground, whether that's hydrogen, whether that's CO2, whether that's other types of gases that are already there. Here's our pipeline network. We have one of the strongest pipeline networks across our country. And here's our CO2 point sources. I've purposely not labeled the companies that are associated with those CO2 point sources. One of the problems we have in our state is that we are the highest emitter of CO2 on a per capita basis. And so we have the intensity of CO2, we have the intensity of skilled workforce, and we have the research universities in the space that are able to help solve the problems for our energy industry. So what are we focusing on? The three components, R&D focused on the problems of industry in our state. Every one of those facilities up and down our river and throughout our state, they do R&D elsewhere. That R&D is done in other locations. So we are trying to attract that R&D back to the state to be done at our universities that are top tier institutions in our state. The workforce development. When an industry member decides to change the way that they make or don't help our workforce change here, that workforce is going to be drawn out elsewhere. They're going to be moved to another location. And then the technology commercialization. This focus is really on the small businesses that will spin out from this project, the startups and the incubation process to help grow and develop the economy in the state of Louisiana. We know that 98% of all net new jobs come from small business, and so we need to help support that to support our economy in the state. We're focused on 6 main areas: carbon capture and utilization and sequestration, the hydrogen economy, CO2 as a feedstock, water management. One of the reasons all these energy industries are here in Louisiana is because of our river. And we need to be able to explain why fresh, clean water is important to the energy industry. If they wanted to try to do this in a place that doesn't have water, would we be able to help transition our technologies to those locations with a lower water demand? Structural integrity, the fact that we have trillions of dollars of built infrastructure up and down the river. We need to make sure that that infrastructure lasts for another 100 years. What does that mean? How do we maintain it? How do we improve it? and then the economic and policy research associated with decarbonization across our state. There are lots of different projects that we'll be working on. Here's some of those projects. I'm not going to go into each one of those, but you have them in front of you. You have them to be able to review. We will be investing dollars in R&D. We'll be investing dollars in workforce, and we'll be investing dollars in technology commercialization. And one of the things that I've never had in my career is the full backing of many institutions of higher education, specifically my home institution of LSU. And one of the things they like to do is they like to hype things up. So they made us a hype video. It makes me want to go back to school and focus on energy in my career, doesn't it? So I'm open to any questions or discussion if you guys have any.
Andrew, thank you so much. Before we open to questions, I wonder, Supervisor Warner, would you want to make any comments as the LSU representative on the dais today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner. Your words that you and I have shared many, many times over many, many issues that have come before this board, you always say to me, I want to see LSU lead. And so I'm very proud today with this team here present and to be the representative that gets to sit up here with you all to say we are leading, joining with everyone across the state and partners across the country, actually, to see LSU lead in this space in the future of energy, where we know our roots are deep, but we will be the leaders across the country. So I'm very proud of the team. Congratulations again. It's a tremendous opportunity for us all, for every university in the state, for all the enterprises in the state that are in our workforce development that this board in particular has worked so hard to lead with our LCTCS partners, our UL board partners, everyone. So thank you, team. Congratulations again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Regents, do we have any questions or comments for Andrew and team? Commissioner.
I wonder, Andrew, can you speak a little bit to how the work will happen across the institutions and how the money will flow?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So in the three verticals, we have, the use-inspired R&D, and I'll just use that as an example. When industry comes to us and we have these industry partners at the table, they're going to identify critical needs they have in their projects here in the state. And then we are going to produce an RFP, and that RFP is going to be solicited out to our partner universities, and they're going to be able to apply. We're going to use third-party reviewers that are going to then score that, and we have a committee that will then receive those scores back from the third-party reviewers and essentially draw the funding line, just like a national organization would do, the Department of Energy or NIH. And then we would deploy those funds under subcontract to those institutions. We are going to try to leverage this money as well into more dollars for the state of Louisiana. How do we do that? Well, we encourage collaborations across institutions, and that would be part of the rubric of scoring. But we also encourage industry to co-fund the R&D project. And if industry is co-funding that R&D project, we then give that proposal bonus points for having other dollars coming to the table for the project. My hope is to take $160 million and turn it into $1 billion of cash infusion into our ecosystem, both in the R&D space, the workforce space, and the tech commercialization space.
One other question, how long do we have to spend the 160, and what's the annual reporting back, if any, to the federal government?
Oh, there's a lot of annual reporting. I think they've told me that I have quarterly reporting that has to happen throughout every year. It's a 10-year project. We have a milestone at year 2 to really focus on getting the year 3 through 5, and then we'll have another milestone at year 5 to get the funding from year 5 through year 10. The funding is scaled. So early on, it's lower dollars because they're wanting to see us scale up a new infrastructure. The National Science Foundation is known for doing science, doing tests. They're doing an experiment here. The experiment is, can they infuse dollars into a region an economy that hasn't been funded like Boston or San Francisco or San Diego? And can they infuse some federal dollars to turn that location into an economy that becomes a hub for activity in that region? And so this $160 million is truly a science experiment for the National Science Foundation in what would be called place-based economic development. We talk about, ecosystems, and we talk about what is available out there. And everybody always comes to me and says, hey, why isn't LSU more like MIT? And I say, well, LSU's not in Boston, right? And I explain to them, if you go to a scientist and you say, what is an ecosystem to you? They're likely going to talk about the redwood forest in Northern California. They're going to talk about the mangrove swamps in Florida. If you took the mangrove swamps in Florida and moved them to Northern California, they would die. If you take the redwood forest of Northern California and move them to Louisiana, they would die, because the ecosystem has to be built around the strengths in that region. And that's what we're trying to do here in the energy sector, build an ecosystem around the strengths of our state.
We've got a question from Regent Aubrey,
As always.
as always.
Congratulations. Certainly, I think this is a phenomenal project and definitely could be transformative to our state. In the part of the commitments, in terms of the request, were there any in-kind requirements from the state of Louisiana or LSU or any of the partners, cash and or in-kind, that would be needed to support this project? And are there any gaps?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did get a $67.5 million commitment from Louisiana Economic Development. There was not a matching requirement for the proposal. So that was just sort of lagniappe in the things we would say in Louisiana. We do have, every one of our industry partners gave us a letter of support, and they committed personnel, right? So their personnel are going to participate in our committee meetings, in our evaluations, in our team activities. And so there is some in-kind that we have documented back to the National Science Foundation, and I'm happy to share that with you guys if needed. The question about, are there any gaps? Well, ultimately, the National Science Foundation wants to see these types of things become self-sustaining. So what's the gap? The gap becomes, how do we fund this long-term? And then how do we replicate it for other industry sectors? Again, energy is sort of our lifeblood in the state of Louisiana. There's other industry sectors that are up and coming and growing in the state of Louisiana that we could potentially do something similar for inside our state to bolster our state's energy, or bolster our state's R&D, workforce, and technology commercialization around those energies, or around those components.
I think that's great. And doesn't LSU have a center of excellence in the energy space?
We have several centers focused on energy. At LSU, we recently created the Institute for Energy Innovation. We also have several other centers. We have our, which you may know of, the Center for Energy Studies out of our Coast and the Environment, which Greg Upton runs. They are all involved in this process and participatory. So this was not siloed away from anything. It was very inclusive.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Aubrey. Any other questions? Regent Gill.
Regarding the RFP process, is it only for those partners who were in the initial proposal, or is it for like y'all are going to put it out and everybody can potentially get a piece?
So it's going to be for any, on the R&D side, it's going to be for any institution in the state. We covered almost every institution of higher education in our planning process. We obviously couldn't get them all. I mean, it's just it's a logistics issue. The intention is that we're going to add any institution that wants to participate into our group, and we're going to also be growing our industry commitments. So those industry partners that you saw on that chart, there's going to be more that are added to bring more resources to bear on the project.
And besides carbon, do y'all have any potential emphasis on sustainable energy moving forward with these funds?
So I think all of the components we talked about require low-cost energy to perform, and whether that's solar, wind, right, geothermal, right, those things are going to have to be participatory in this. But we're specifically focused on the CO2 and the CO2's carbon capture and sequestration. Again, if we can store it here, we can then upcycle it and reuse it at some point in the future. But we're just going to have the energy to break bonds and make bonds of the chemistries, and that's where we need to have these breakthroughs in science.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
But how will this impact your students and students at your partnering schools and universities? For example, will this be new programs, new majors, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I'll just repeat the question, and that is, how will this impact our students and the students of our partners? So I think this is one of those things that students will have an opportunity to perform R&D. Many of our institutions have undergraduate research components to their education. LSU recently launched a emphasis or a concentration in carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. When we bring on new hires under this project, they're going to be asked to identify why they're not duplicative of somebody else in the state. So we're not going to try to be competing with some of the hires we make and the R&D projects. We're going to be trying to collaborate, which will give our students a great opportunity to collaborate across institutions. With regards to the workforce side and the LCTCS system, you know, those students are also going to be given opportunities when we have projects that are inspired by industry and we have a new curriculum developed, that they're going to be able to participate in those new curriculums across our state. The reality is our workforce needs in our state are steep when it comes to the energy and energy transition. We currently have, depending on how you cut the numbers, 250,000 employees in the state that work in the oil and gas space. If energy transition goes the way that everybody is expecting it to go, and many of these industries are going to be asked to become fairly carbon neutral or lower carbon intensity by 2050, those job requirements are going to grow to from 250,000 to 500,000. And so the adult learner is also a really important target for what we're working on.
Great questions. Any others? Commissioner?
Just one more. I just want to say how great this is. Supervisor Warner, this is leadership big time. We are very excited about this huge collaborative project. I want this team that is before us to know we are so proud of you. And President Tate tells everyone, I've heard this 17 times, that your site visit was the best site visit he has ever seen executed collaboratively by anyone in his history of doing this work. So kudos to each and every one of you. We're looking forward to amazing things.
Wonderful. We couldn't have done it without our great partners and all the team that came together to make it happen.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Andrew, and thanks to everyone who made this possible. Indeed, great news to start our meeting with. We're going to move on to our committee meetings, but first I want to acknowledge in his first time with us in his new role as the UL System President, Rick Gallo is with us, so thanks for being with us for your first Regents meeting in your new role. And of course, by his side, I want to acknowledge LCTCS System President Monty Sullivan as well, so thank you both. First up is the Audit Committee, and there would be no Audit Committee without Audit Chair Regent Seal. So Regent Seal, please call your committee to order.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Audit Committee to order. Ms. Bentley Smith, an opportunity to call the roll when she gets situated.
Sorry, Regent Seal. All right, I'd like to call the Audit Committee to order. Regent Seal.
Here.
Regent Williams Brown.
Here.
Regent Creed. Here. Regent David. Okay, I know he's here. Regent Finley. Here. And Regent Wheel. Okay, I thought I saw. There you go. All right, we have a quorum, sir.
Thank you. Next item is item 3, the internal audit update. Please proceed.
All right, I'd like to introduce Kristen Bork and Laura Swallow from what is still a postal weight in Netherville, but for a very short period of time, it will be transferring over to Eisner-Amper at our next board meeting. So, if y'all would like to begin.
Thank you.
Our agenda this morning will include an update on our internal audit activity, including an overview of audits completed, those in progress, and what is remaining for the fiscal year. So this slide here provides you with an overview of the audits included in our fiscal year 2024 plan, as well as their statuses. The top chart here is the main audits for the year. As of today, our team has completed the LASFA IT security processes audit, and the final report on that was issued in February. We are currently wrapping up the expenditure processes audit. We will provide more detail on this status in the next slide. Our next audit on our plan will be over the LSTEM program and its processes. We have begun planning for this one, and we hope to kick off in the next couple of weeks. In addition to these main audits, our team will complete follow-up procedures of the observations identified in audits from prior years. This will include Regents, IT security processes, and endowments process. We have outstanding observations and management action plans that were still in progress during our initial follow-ups for those, so those will be reviewed. And then in addition to those, we have follow-up procedures are also planned for LUMCON accounting and IT security processes audit and the Regents LaCarte card procurement card program. So as mentioned, we wanted to give more detail on the status of our expenditure process audit. For a recap, this audit was added to our internal audit plan in response to a letter received from the Louisiana Legislative Auditor communicating risk of material misstatement through management override of controls. As explained back in our October board meeting when this was added, this risk isn't a new risk, but it's inherent. And the LLA's letter was issued in response to a change made by the AICPA to their standards, which now just requires this communication to be made. So in response to the letter, we adjusted our audit plan to include testing of processes and controls related to the expenditure payment and approvals process for Regents. As of today, we have obtained and reviewed all of the applicable policies and procedures. We've conducted a number of interviews and process walkthroughs with appropriate staff. We've completed data analysis and sample selection of transactions and the testing of those transactions, policy assessments. We are now working to wrap up our documentation and complete our draft report, which we will then meet with management to discuss any of the observations in our draft report. And then following that, we will issue our finalized report to audit committee. Based on our initial assessment and our testing that has been performed though, there have been no observations identified related to the risk of management override of controls as communicated in the LLA's letter. Internal controls such as system access controls and segregation of duties and functions were identified through our initial testing process that we feel help mitigate these risks. Once our procedures are all complete, a full report, as mentioned, will be issued to the audit committee to include any other observations over the processes and best practice recommendations that our team may have for management's consideration. Any questions on our internal audit status?
Are you on schedule?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the committee? Is there any other business to come before the committee?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Regent Seal. Next up is the Finance Committee. I'd like to ask Regent David to please call the Finance Committee to order.
All right, thank you. Mr. Labriere, could you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Regent David.
Here.
Regent Meir.
Present.
Regent Creed.
Here.
Regent May. Regent Seal.
Here.
Regent Temple.
Here.
Supervisor Warner. She left. Supervisor Jackson. and Supervisor Tarver.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. We'll now move to item 3, the fiscal year 2024-2025 executive budget overview. Now, I know we're still waiting on some of the pieces to come through, but why don't you tell us, Matthew, what you've seen so far?
Yes, sir. So on February 8th, the governor presented his executive budget for fiscal year 2025. Higher education in the executive budget received a net reduction of $104 million. This includes a few adjustments for all of higher education. The first being a $3.3 million increase for the LSU First Benefit Program. The second is a $600,000 increase for LumCon, and this is for the federal match portion for the National Estuary Research Reserve Program that LumCon was awarded last year. There was a $15 million reduction for mandated costs. This is a net reduction which includes a $39 million reduction for retirement savings based on some debt payments that were made by the legislature. But then that was offset by increases of about $24 million to the, risk management for the institutions, legislative auditor increases, group benefits, and classified employee increases. Next is a TOPS adjustment of $600,000. This is a small reduction based on student participation in the program. Last year it was around $6 million, so that gap is closing. And then finally, there was a offset for TOPS with the TOPS fund receiving an increase of $23.8 million. So that $23.8 million was no longer needed on the state general fund side. And finally, there was a decrease in line item appropriations that were received during the legislative process. Those totaled about $68 million. The non-recurring adjustments is a normal piece of the executive budget. We've just never seen one of this size because there were so many dollars available last year, and there were quite a few line items added. So in total, that's how we get to the $104 million reduction. I do want to point out that the base funding for all institutions remains the same as it was last year, and so with the exception of the mandated cost reductions, which are allocated out by each institution. And that concludes the overview of the executive budget. So the next piece on this will be the agenda item 4, which is the review and approval of the FY 24-25 preliminary funding recommendation. Regents is required by law to submit to the legislature by March 31st each year a formula of a distribution for all of higher education. And so this action today will complete that part of the process, and we'll be able to send that to the education committees on the House and Senate side, the Senate Committee on Finance, and the House Appropriations Committee. The next slide is just a timeline of where we've gone with the formula since the outcomes-based model was first used in fiscal year 2017. You can see that this board has made it a purpose to decrease the base and work on increasing cost and outcomes. And so this current year, we've gotten to the point of 50% base, 20% cost, and 30% outcomes. So we've made quite a dent in the outcome side, pushing that forward, and the reliance on base funding as well. You'll see that in fiscal year 21, we did not use a formula. This was due to a reduction in higher education based on revenue estimates at the time of the pandemic that was going on.
And just so I understand, it's not that it wasn't used, we just carried forward the year before, right? Is that right?
We'd used it we ran the model, it just wasn't used in that year, just for the reduction.
But I guess the breakdowns were based on the previous
Yes.
year's formula. So it was formula-based, just the previous year's
Correct.
formula because there were less funds.
Correct.
Got you.
Yes. And so moving into the next slide, so this is our recommendation, our recommended preliminary distribution. This is a standstill budget based on the executive budget with all the reductions put in. The the formula is not used in this distribution model, but it is still based on the FY24 model that we did use. But there's been no use of the model in 25. We do plan to use the model or bring forth a recommendation to use the model if additional funds are added to the base budgets going forward through the legislative process.
When do we know that? In April?
The bill hasn't been scheduled to move yet, but I would imagine it would move from House Appropriations sometime in April.
And things, I guess, could change with the Revenue Estimating Committee coming forward, and maybe
Correct.
there's more funds.
Yes. There'll be at least one revenue estimating conference meeting before the bill is finalized. So any revenue that becomes available or any amendments during the process that move money from another agency to higher education, then we would come back with a recommendation then.
Thank you.
And so that concludes the presentation on the allocation. So the recommendation is that senior staff recommends the approval of the preliminary distribution, which allocates the proposed funding in accordance with the methodology we discussed, and we will continue advocating for increased funding during the legislative process.
And I believe that's item 4, so thank you, Matthew. Members, you've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to approve the fiscal year 2024-2025 preliminary funding recommendations?
I move for approval.
And a second?
Second.
A second, Regent Temple. Any other discussion or questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Matthew, we had talked about the review of a 5-year. Where do we stand on really doing a comprehensive review of the funding formula and the reduction from 23 to 24 in the base from 55% to 50%? We skew that number, I guess, we putting more emphasis on the cost.
Yes, sir. So for your first question, so the review actually begins with the committee members, the review committee members tomorrow afternoon. So we have, it will be 3 representatives from each system, the system CFO, the system chief academic officer, and then each system president selected an institution, one rep from an institution to be a part of it. So we will begin that process tomorrow and going through a comprehensive review of the formula and potential changes to the model. Your second question about where we were, yes, we took, so let me find my sheet. So it was a little bit of both. When we took 5% from the base, we moved that, 3% of it was moved to cost and 2% of it was moved to outcomes to further both of those sections.
So how much further will the base drop? What is the plan?
Well, about 5 years ago when we did the last review, the goal that was agreed to by the system CFOs was to get to a 50% base. So each institution would have a reliance, know they would at least get 50% of the funds that they had last year. Originally the goal was to go 25% cost, 25% base, just to have a split. But as more money started going into the formula, in our discussions with the CFOs and the system presidents, it was more of a, and then bringing a recommendation to this board was to move more towards outcomes and further outcomes as what we wanted to incentivize.
Okay. And I would be curious, and may, in the interest of time, may not be here, but I would like to know, when you look at the overall numbers recommended, it's gonna, while we say that there is a standstill budget, we do know the cost of inflation and things have gone up and continue to go up. And seeing a community college system $10 million change in the red or negative, and other systems like the UL, 25 million, there will be some pain points that they're going to have to deal with, I would assume.
Absolutely.
In terms of how they're going. I mean, while there were a lot of one-time things in there year over year, but there will definitely be some impact. So I would like to hear from, you know, those respective system presidents, you know, so that we're not surprised at how the campuses are going to be dealing with those reductions year over year.
Thank you,
So-
Regent Aubrey, and red numbers across the board are never a good thing. But go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Regent Aubrey. I appreciate the comment. We have two partners in the back, and two I'm sure that are watching, or their staff are watching. We are continuing to work diligently to make the case for the reinvestment in post-secondary education and what that means to our state. You heard from the legislative leadership yesterday talking about how are you explaining your outcomes? How are you explaining that, what is the return on the investment from what we get? So we've had two, I think, very good finance meetings, appropriations and finance. Do the good meetings translate into additional budget for higher education? We will see, but we're working with the leadership and we're working with all of the legislators to talk about in totality the finances of our institutions. This situation, the amount of state debt through the unfunded accrued liability that comes out of our budget, 60 cents on a dollar or more. The fact that our institutions spend about $50 to $60 million a year of their operating dollars on deferred maintenance. How do we have a more reliable schedule there? And then you heard Senate President Henry talk a little bit about fee autonomy and whether that's a reality. So a collective conversation about how do we finance and how do we move the work forward, and then of course a $40 million workforce fund, and what does that look like as well for higher education. So I feel like we have very good partners and very strong message. The question is, will we get additional funds, and will the Revenue Estimating Conference allow for some additional support for higher education? So it's early days, but we're continuing to work hard, and you're right, all the red is not comforting, particularly as we hear about uncertainty next year as well.
All right, any further?
Does this include the, does your report include the, that 0.45 on a cent, sales tax we heard about? We heard them yesterday talking about we're all gonna have to,
Right,
you know,
so
tighten our belts or whatever.
the 0.45 sales tax rolls off June 30th, 2025. So it's not included in this, but it would be, as President Henry mentioned yesterday, when the budget comes out at this time next year for 26, that's where it will be incorporated into.
And what kind of impact do you think that would have on these higher education budgets?
Well, the 0.45 generates around $430 million in general fund revenue. So it depends on how the division and the governor's office want to spread that reduction across the state. But as was mentioned yesterday, higher education and healthcare are the two unprotected areas of the budget. So I mean, there's a chance that we could stand to have a great impact from that.
Any other questions or comments from everybody? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion passes. Is there any other business to come before the committee?
No, sir.
Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. All right, and a second. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Regent David. Next up is the Legislative Committee, and I'll ask Regent Temple to call your committee to order, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to call the Legislative Committee to order. This is going to be interesting. Bree, will you call the roll, please, ma'am?
Oh, absolutely, no problem. Regent Temple,
Here.
Regent Aubrey.
Here.
Regent May. Regent Meyer.
Present.
Regent Pryor.
Here.
Regent Sterling. Regent Gill.
Here.
LCTCS representative. LSU representative. SU representative.
Here.
UL system representative. Have a quorum.
Thank you, Bree. Appreciate it. We will now move on to item number 3, Legislative Study Reports Update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our first item is to give you an update about the work of the Dual Enrollment Task Force. You will remember that that task force was created by Act 128 back in 2019. and consists of 13 members. And those 13 members really represent the entirety of the state when it comes to educators, nonprofits, advocates, counselors. There's just a very broad, very engaged group of people involved in dual enrollment. I've been on a lot of task forces over the years, and I'm sure you have too. You're not going to find a more engaged task force than this task force. It's an amazing group of people, and they have done an amazing amount of work. Since then, we have given a variety of different kinds of reports. One of the items today is to give you the latest update, and my colleague Adam Lowe here will give us all of the data behind it. But since 2019, that task force has met 20 times. It's wrong for you to think that the only time the work was done was when they were in the room. There has been an enormous amount of work that has happened in dual enrollment, and I think the data that Adam is going to share today is going to show the impact of just the thought partners that have been involved in that work. Still, what I want to do today is to set up at least some of the ideas behind where it is that we are headed when it comes to dual enrollment, because the reality is that the last 4 years of work have really been about the initial ideas that were set up around that task force, the original set of deliverables, almost all of which have been provided and done and established, and really the data that Adam is going to share is a testimony to that. What I want to do is just really quickly just go through the next set of 10 recommendations that the task force has brought forward. I'm not going to talk about all of them today. I'm sure you're relieved by that. But I do at least want to talk about some of them, and would be, of course, happy to answer any questions about any of them. So the first I want to highlight is number 5. Number 5 is talking about really, as we move forward in expanding dual enrollment, we need more people. The reality is that to expand access to dual enrollment, we need more qualified folk to teach those classes. And so this effort from number 5 is really for us together as a state, educational ecosystem, to be able to provide that training, that education, to create those educated people to be able to offer those classes. And so we partnered with 3 institutions to be able to craft that, effectively a graduate certificate, to be able to allow, maybe high school teachers, maybe folk who work in banking, maybe people of all kinds of different background, to be able to get that training, that qualification, that then enables them to go into a collegiate level classroom and teach those freshman level classes that are offered as part of dual enrollment. So as I say, we've been working with those 3 institutions. We are working through the process of getting those programs built, getting approval from all the systems to make sure that those qualifications really do pass muster in being able to teach those classes. We anticipate that happening in the fall of this year. And so again, that will be a very significant piece of our being able to offer dual enrollment. Next one that I really want to talk about is, the text is really small. Here I can see it. Oh, thank you. That helps tremendously. Number 6 is going to encourage statewide collaboration among colleges and universities to utilize instructor credentialing standards that enable more instructors to teach. And so this is the sort of the twin of that. So on the one hand, yes, we want to offer those teacher training, but we also want to make sure that as we do that those credentials really are recognized by everyone. Right? We aren't furthered by, now you earned this credential, but you can only use it over here. And so again, this is pretty unique across the country. We've had a lot of conversations with other states. Lots of people want to do this. Nobody has been able to bring it off yet. So we're actually really excited about being able to do this work, to be able to collaborate in this way. I want to draw your attention to number 8. Number 8 is really moving forward on the research side of this, because of course it's the case that as we take steps forward in trying to further improve dual enrollment, we need to really understand the impact of the work that we have been doing and the work that needs to be done going forward. I think we all know the basic data that dual enrollment enables many more students to be able to make that journey into post-secondary education of all kinds. But we really need to understand, well, exactly what kind of impact is that happening? I actually had that question just when we gave testimony to, I believe, to the House Finance. So they wanted to ask, well, what kind of financial impact does having dual enrollment have on a family when a student goes to college? Like, how much shorter is their time to degree? How much money do they save? Well, being able to give definitive answers to those kinds of things, I think, is a really important piece of this. And again, we want to partner with some national partners to be able to really sharpen our pencil to try to understand that. And then the last I want to focus on today is number 7, launching a technical course matrix to increase the use of common course numbers in technical fields. Well, where we are right now, and Adam will share the details in just a moment, when it comes to dual enrollment, it's about 80% of the dual enrollment is in academic courses. About 20% is in technical fields. That 20% is up a little bit. As you can imagine, the technical side took a big hit during the COVID years. Many of those courses just because of the kind of the subject area, the people needed to be in the room, and COVID didn't lend itself to that. But still, we want that 20% to significantly increase, and we certainly believe that there are lots more students across the state who would benefit from all kinds of different dual enrollment, but would definitely benefit from having more access to technical education. Part of the other work that we need to do is then to make sure that when they take those dual enrollment classes, that they really are able to take that dual enrollment technical courses and be able to use them all across the various different kinds of curriculum that they might be involved in. I think you're aware of the work that we've done on the academic side around general education transfer, and now with the universal transfer pathways. This is the cousin of that in the technical fields, for us to now do that same kind of work to make sure that as we increase access to that technical education, we also make really well constructed pathways, ideally that move students, that open up a journey to go from a technical diploma or technical certificate all the way as far as anybody wants to go, all the way to graduate school, if that's what they'd like to do, without ever losing any credits or ever meeting any curricular barriers. So those are the summary of the 10 recommendations. Happy to answer any questions that you might have about that, but also happy to hand over to Adam, who can share all of the data and all of the numbers, which is, it's foreign for me not to be the one sharing the numbers. But I'm happy for Adam to do it.
I do have a question for you, Trish.
Sir.
Is dual enrollment or children who go to homeschool allowed who are excelling in homeschool, are they allowed in dual enrollment? And if not, why?
So they are, and we certainly have many students from homeschool classrooms who are part of dual enrollment. Adam may have the numbers to hand to know exactly how many. The way that we built the access to dual enrollment means that those students can qualify for the ability to take dual enrollment just like every other student in the state. So yes, sir, they certainly are part of it.
So I have a persistent person that's been said they were denied dual enrollment admission at Louisiana Tech.
Okay.
And that was incorrect. They said they could not homeschool.
Well, maybe we can talk afterwards about the exact, to talk specifics about that exact case. I'm happy to talk that through, but it certainly is the case that there are. Yeah.
There's no policy prohibiting it.
Policy
I do know most institutions have slightly different criteria for demonstration of college readiness for homeschool students because they don't have, the typical transcript that a traditional public or private school student would have that they can use to evaluate their readiness for a particular class. So, but there's no prohibition on homeschool students participating, and I don't have the number in front of me, but there are a few percent among all the public colleges and universities. There are a few percent of students who are homeschool students.
It's going to depend on exactly what they were trying to get into, what their transcript looked like, and all of that. Yeah, we can certainly do that.
question.
I'm just curious,
Sure.
in Lafayette, I know we have the Early College Academy, where we actually have kind of its own high school located on the SLCC campus. My question is, one, are they considered dual enrolled students? Are they in your count? And two, they graduate from associate students from high school? But are there other programs like that across the state and strata models that you're looking at?
So yes, those certainly are considered to be dual enrollment, and there are several schools like that across the state that are offering those kinds of programs. As you say, they're really terrific programs. Many of those students graduate high school with an associate degree when they graduate high school, which is just terrific. But yeah, absolutely, those students are considered to be part of dual enrollment, and the way that the dual enrollment policy is created recognizes those programs and has special provisions exactly for those programs. Yeah.
So that one and the one at River Parishes are the two longest established and largest ones. Across the state as a whole, last year 240 students earned a full associate's degree while still in high school, and I think over half of those, I'd have to go back and look.
I'm sorry, how many?
240. Over half of those were at those two programs. So, those programs have not scaled up in other communities around the state, and certainly the department's Fast Forwards Graduation Pathways Initiative is trying to encourage more partnerships like that, and Regents has been supportive of institutions that have proposed new early college academies and similar models.
Do we know the areas of those 240 students? What's the predominant?
The predominant is in a general education transfer degree. There were only 15 that were in more applied science fields.
Okay. There's an opportunity for healthcare
Absolutely.
in that space.
Absolutely, and healthcare is quite common in the one-year technical diploma or really the one-year certificates and shorter-term certificates.
So your
both.
CNAs and things are falling in that group. Okay,
Exactly.
Thank you.
So we see that in the shorter-term certificates. We've not seen as much at the one-year or full 2-year associates.
Awesome.
We really expect this to pick up now that the universal transfer pathways have been created, because now that we have these seamless transfer pathways that allow students to have that security, if I take these courses, they'll be honored everywhere. We really expect many more students to follow those pathways and do them.
Thank you.
Always happy to jump straight into the topics that are most interest to you. So
More questions over
keep bringing
here.
them up. Oh, one more question for Tristan.
Over
Go
here,
ahead.
right here.
Oh, I'm good. No, I'm the chairman of the board.
Well, I got my question.
May
May I have a
Of this. Go ahead. I know you had another one.
As it relates to the outcomes part of the Regents formula funding, is dual enrollment an eligible or a measured part of the outcomes? And if so, how much is it? I ask that question because institutions that I've been around, I've been a couple commencement speakers and been doing things, and one of the complaints that I hear from the institutions is we're pushed by momentum to do dual enrollment, but we're not compensated at a level, and it's impacting our institutions' budgets. So I want to know if outcomes, if this is one of the formula funding, are we adjusting it and taking in consideration dual enrollment participation as a way to encourage those institutions who are struggling financially to go after dual enrollment students? $300, they say, is not enough for them to deliver the kind of education, particularly that they are used to doing from a tuition perspective for those students, because many of them in high school, they do require additional resources. Some of them are strong, but some of them are struggling. And they do require not just what a normal student coming in as a freshman would require.
Yes, sir, Regent Aubrey. So the formula rewards dual enrollment in both the cost and the outcomes portion. So on the outcomes portion, we account for all progression of students. So as they move from freshman to sophomore, junior to senior. Within that, the dual enrollment student, the preparatory student, is counted the same as a freshman level student. So there's no outcome associated with it because they haven't completed a degree, but we're counting their enrollment in the institution there. On the cost side, we reward all student credit hours earned by the institution. So those students that are taking credit courses, whether it be general education or technical education, those are also counted in the formula as well.
So let me add, Regent Aubrey, to the main question, I think, which is how do we fund dual enrollment? How do we fund it at scale? We have a request. This is our second year of a request this year for $35 million to ensure that every high school student as a junior or senior could receive 1 or 2 courses at no cost to the student. We would want LASFA to administer the program, and that way we would ensure that we would stop some of the conversations that you're hearing and I'm hearing, which is we love dual enrollment, but we don't have enough money to pay for it. And the bigger challenge is the students who do have the funds are the students who are participating, and the students who don't but could clearly benefit are unable to do so.
Correct.
So I think the formula is one piece of it, but the major piece is how do we provide state funds to marry up with the $15 million in MFP dollars to ensure we have a base of funding so that every student could participate as a junior and senior in high school and could select if they want to do career technical or academic courses, a pathway to nursing, etc. So that's what we're trying to continue to promote.
Yeah, there's one school district had some extra dollars and they paid for their dual enrollment students for one academic year, but the next year the students wanted to participate, but the district didn't pay for it. And so it's caused an issue that some of those parents and those students are experiencing out there. So maybe as a part of the formula funding, we can incentivize and increase from the outcomes perspective, more dollars or to incentivize those institutions that maybe have those kind of challenges. But I definitely understand the need, and I support the growth for dual enrollment. I think is outstanding, and it's a good way for us to keep those students engaged in the higher education process. So,
yes, sir.
Thank you.
In fact, I also think in certain communities, it's also a amazingly significant way to show the students that you are capable and you can do this work, and you need to take advantage of the opportunity to, you know, whatever it is at the next level from a higher education perspective, whether it is moving in the direction of a 2-year degree or 4-year degree or credential in general. So, you know, this was one of the main things when I first got started that with the board that I was very, very, very excited about, and to see where it's come, even though obviously it's far from perfect, we're making progress. And you know, as was mentioned earlier, we're fortunately probably ahead of the curve with the rest of the country when it comes to dual enrollment, even though we still got a ways to go. But I think we're making you know, great progress. So are there any other questions? Okay. Anything else you have, Dr. Lowe?
Yes, so I wanted to share some of that progress
Great.
With the numbers, so you can see where that progress has occurred over the last few years. Again, I'm Adam Lowe. I appreciate the opportunity to speak again with you. Been before the Regents a couple times over the past few years as a consultant with Education Strategy Group, a national consulting firm that has been advising Regents for the past 5 years as we've gone on this journey for dual enrollment system improvement and transformation. You have copies of the report received previously, and in the slides there's going to be much more data than I'm going to share with you right now. So if there's specific data points you want to look at, those two are both places you can look to. I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have, whether it's credentials or otherwise or healthcare. So when the master's plan came out 5 years ago and identified dual enrollment as a key strategy for achieving the goals of increased credential attainment, we were particularly looking ways to see how that expansion could increase and support access and participation to students across the state, because we recognized that there was very significant uneven distribution of where dual enrollment was occurring. But we hadn't taken a look to really see where that distribution lay, and have the last 3 years now produced data reports looking at student participation, utilizing both Department of Education data as well as Regents data to understand the trends best. This slide you see here is our attempt to track a goal that was established by this board in conjunction with Bessie at one of the joint board meetings in December of 2019 that really set a vision for the future, which is for the graduating class of 2029, that's the 8th grade students this year, that every student should graduate high school with college credit, whether academic or career technical credit, a post-secondary credential of value, or both. And that includes both dual enrollment, advanced placement, and CLEP earned credit, as well as industry-based credentials that are as defined as credentials of value. So the way the department measures industry-based credentials right now, we include both basic and advanced in this pool for this metric right here. Sometime in the future, as we refine those definitions, as the department and the Workforce Commission continue to refine them, we may refine this metric. But for now, we use any industry-based credential earned by a high school student, as well as any credit earning scores on an AP or CLEP exam or IB exam, as well as any passing of a dual enrollment course. And so you will see that percentage of the graduating class has increased by 8% over the past 4 years, with the most recent data being available for the class of 2022. Those 29,000 students who earned some college credit are both the highest percent, but also the highest number of students as well, as we've seen, which I think is sort of noteworthy in terms of the aggregate number as well, because of the pandemic impact on high school enrollment, with many students who left the public high school system and have not returned. So we anticipate, with some of the growth we've seen, that number will continue to grow, and continue to work with the department on a variety of programs to support that. So while the report has some additional analysis of the public high school graduating class, I'm going to focus the next few slides today just on the participation within Regents institutions, within the public colleges and universities, which would include those homeschool students, private school students, and including, in fact, some out-of-state students who take courses online, in addition to public and public charter school students, which make up the majority of them. Again, over the past 5 years, since we started collecting the baseline data on this and reporting on it in this fashion, we've seen some significant growth, whether you look at it by the number of individual students participating, or the number of courses they're taking, or the number of credit hours earned. And in particular, in the last year, we've seen a 13% growth in the number of students, up to 32,500 students, and then 17–18% if you look at it by courses or credit hours earned. For those of you who recall, who have been on this journey for longer, back in 2018-19 and 2019-20, Regents at that time period had enacted their first set of policy around dual enrollment in 2018 that had gone into effect in 2018, and that policy had originally had some very high barriers to entry for students to take general education courses, a very sort of narrow pathway by which a student could determine eligibility. It involved high school GPA and a composite ACT score and a subject-specific score, as well as a counselor recommendation. So a whole host of hurdles that students had to go through. During the pandemic, Regents had to adopt an emergency policy that created more flexibility and multiple pathways for students to demonstrate readiness for coursework. We have subsequently enacted that. If you recall, last year you passed academic affairs policy to enact some of those student eligibility standards into permanent policy, and create multiple pathways now for students to demonstrate readiness. That has helped for the increase, certainly in that 2020-21 school year when pandemic interrupted testing. One of the things that we're very pleased to have seen in the growth of the last few years is that growth is happening when you disaggregate by race and ethnicity across all major student races and ethnicities. And in particular, we've seen faster than average increases among African American and Hispanic students. So 2,000 additional students in this past year identifying as African American or Hispanic who took a dual enrollment course. Which is starting to close some of those participation gaps that we have traditionally seen in dual enrollment. And I would like to just sort of recognize that two institutions in particular were significant contributors to that growth in this past year. Half of those 1,571 additional African American students came from an increase at Baton Rouge Community College, and a third of the additional Hispanic students were by increases in Hispanic students taking courses through Southeastern. One of the things that we've seen when we look at the high school level is that the intentional expansion to high schools with high percentages of students of color have resulted in some of these increases when those schools previously had very little dual enrollment access. And as Dr. Denley mentioned earlier, career and technical education was an area for which we had identified even pre-pandemic as an area for growth opportunities in the state. And certainly when you hear presentations like the fuel presentation earlier about the need for continued emphasis on workforce skills development in high demand fields, it is an area for which we know there is growth. There are very few students taking engineering or engineering technology or chemistry type classes that will prepare them for entry into that fuel sector, right? So those are an area for which we need to continue to strengthen and build programs. Certainly in other high demand fields such as teacher education and healthcare was mentioned previously are areas where there are opportunities for continued growth. About half of dual enrollment course taking is in 3 general education subject areas: English, math, and history. Those are clearly very important for students pursuing post-secondary education in a variety of fields, but yet the sort of connections to degree programs in workforce demand subjects are an area that we continue to emphasize the need for opportunities to build. Again, those are highly concentrated, and so I'm going to give some recognition of those programs that are doing a lot of work in this area. So a third of the students in health, allied health sciences and nursing fields are taking those courses through North Shore Technical College. A quarter of the welding students are taking it through North Shore Technical College. And fully 2/3 of the business courses are taken through either Northwestern State or Delgado Community College. So areas where institutions across the state, we've got some pockets of excellence, but for which we need to figure out ways of scaling up. No surprise, during the pandemic, we saw a very significant increase in online and hybrid delivery models. That innovation that happened on that rapid pace during the pandemic has been institutionalized by a number of colleges and universities and sustained, so that we are now continuing to see 21% of coursework in online courses. In particular, the largest programs now that are delivering online dual enrollment courses are Baton Rouge Community College, LSU Eunice, and Northwestern have all had rapid growth and continue to strengthen and build out those programs to make courses available to students throughout the state. Popular online subjects include both English and history, as well as business fields. Lastly, again, talking about across the state. So if you look kind of by region of the state, the Northwest region, Shreveport-Bossier area, has the highest rates of dual enrollment participation when you look across the kind of metropolitan regions. geography does still really matter in the state. So we've got some areas with very low participation rates. Orleans Parish, largely to the challenges of all the small individual charter operators, rather than a system that can engage with with Delgado and Nunez and UNO and Suno. Really, it makes the work that much harder for the institutions because they have to work with so many individual schools. And rebuilding, in particular, the Career Center programs. I was visiting yesterday with the Youth Force NOLA organization that helped set up the New Orleans Career Center. Rebuilding career tech ed programs in New Orleans has been a challenge due to that distributed model, and so providing resources on a regional basis is certainly for the technical fields is important in many areas of the state, particularly in the rural communities where access to technical programs is sometimes a challenge. So I will stop here. If you've got questions about sort of the geography or subject areas or anything else I presented, I'm happy to take some more of that.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. According to this map, besides Jeff Davis Parish in Southwest and then into Central Louisiana, the rates are generally lower than the rest of the state. What are we doing to potentially increase our dual enrollment numbers in that area? Is it internet connectivity? Is it programming? Kind of what are we seeing that's hindering that progress?
Yeah, I can take it. Sure. So, we, in many ways, we look to the campuses to reach out to their local high schools in their areas to try to address those things. Certainly, we have held regional trainings all across the state to try to really help campuses understand what are the challenges that are involved in offering dual enrollment, what are ways, best practices, established best practices that they can utilize to try to overcome some of those barriers. Clearly, having the kinds of barriers that we see, especially in rural areas across the state, this is what we hear, is that on the one hand, transportation can be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so transportation in the sense of, well, if you offer the courses on a campus, especially true for the technical fields, well, how do you get the students there? And so if there's not a well-established transportation system to be able to make that happen, that can be a challenge. Similarly, having qualified faculty to be able to teach those classes can sometimes be a challenge. You need people who have a certain level of education, and so what I've been talking about trying to more people to have those credentials, again, is a way to overcome that. And then, of course, the last is, as you say, having access to broadband internet is a really useful tool, not only in this, but education in general and lots of other things as well. Clearly, there are significant strides that are happening in Louisiana to be able to provide much more access to that, but that's not been the case in the past, and that's been a challenge.
Mr. Chairman, I have a related question. What's the secret sauce in West Feliciana? There's not a school there. It's rural. It's poor.
It's everything, all in one.
It's all of that. So what's the secret sauce in West Feliciana?
In West. So yeah, up in the northwest area. I mean, certainly. Are you talking northwest or sort of like?
No, the blue. West Feliciana.
Oh, West Feliciana. Sorry, I thought you said West
Yeah.
Louisiana. I don't know that parish specifically. Do you know that one?
I do not. I know that. So I'm actually pinch hitting for Dr. Craig today, and I know that she will more than likely. She's even better. Phone a friend. It's perfect.
Willis Reed's coming.
Right.
School district.
So in West Feliciana Parish, and I can get some specific information for you, but my guess, there's one high school in that district. And when that one high school works with the universities around, they could be offering it through, not only are there teachers that they have made sure are trained in West Feliciana, but they have a direct connection with either BRCC or LSU in the region to offer those courses. Another one of these schools, especially in West Feliciana, they've typically had additional funding base because of the plant that's in the area. And so, more funding, more opportunity, and they have created more of a hybrid or virtual options for some of these kids. So they don't have to drive to Baton Rouge, right? It's just like our virtual instruction program in Calcasieu Parish. They can do some of these coursework online.
And so the secret sauce really is an effective school district that has a captured.
That's exactly right. And I'll bring up our the virtual instruction program that we highlighted that's in Calcasieu Parish. One of the things that particular district did was get all of their high schools on the same schedule so that they could use a master teacher to teach in every high school in the parish. And so the difference with Calcasieu versus West Feliciana has one high school, and so they can do more.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So instead of secret sauce, thank you, I'd like to use the expression missionary work. I'm looking at my home parish of Tangipahoa Parish right now, which is surrounded by parishes that have significantly higher participation rates. And I'm wondering how it is that the missionary work of starting dual enrollment in a parish that is at less than 20%, how that works. Where does it start? Does it start with the school board? Does it start with the local university? Does it start with the local technical school? What is the method to kickstart it in a place where it's not happening right now?
So it has to be both, right? It has to be not only the post-secondary institution, but it has to be the buy-in at the local district, because you cannot do dual enrollment without both pieces of the puzzle, if you will. So I would say as we begin, and Dr. Denley aptly talked about it, more training to get more teachers in the districts who can teach those dual enrollment courses on the campus. And so that's what I think the credentialing is what we need to work on so that we can reach these more rural parishes. Now, Tangipahoa has got post-secondary institutions nearby through Southeastern and North Shore. We would certainly have to look into why they are not hooked in with Southeastern. Southeastern has one of the largest dual enrollment programs in the state. They've been doing it almost more than anybody else. And so the question is, I think that we can talk to certainly Southeastern to find out, is there a disconnect that we could certainly help them make those connections with the district?
I'm sure Southeastern is influencing both St. Tammany and Livingston in the surrounding area, which are all showing good and progressive numbers, but not Tangipahoa itself.
Which surprises me. That's right.
So the missionary work may need to start at the school board.
Yes.
But I do think your point about the institutions, having the capacity and resources makes a big difference as well. Those that have invested heavily in these programs, North Shore and Southeastern in that area in particular, are indeed part of the reason you see high rates in that region. Maybe not Tangipahoa specifically, but likewise, if you look over in the Lafayette area, South Louisiana Community College's strong partnership with Lafayette and St. Martin and St. Landry are part of the reason that those numbers are up in that region as well. So the institutional capacity and commitment.
I'm going to try my hand at missionary work and see what I can do.
All right, that sounds great. Let us know if you need some assistance.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. In Orleans Parish, is the issue the public school system itself, or the trying to get into the various charter school boards?
It's a challenge. So if you talk to Delgado and to UNO and SUNO in particular, the Orleans Parish School Board is really a very light school board at this point. It's not directly operating any of the high schools. The high schools are all independently operated by independent charter boards, and so those colleges and universities have to develop relationships and partnerships with each and every school. And the New Orleans Career Center has at least created a hub for the technical coursework, so that they've created career pathways now in I think 14 different areas that through Delgado and UNO that students can now start taking dual enrollment classes in. But it's a building phase. I mean, they're still very much building that program and building those partnerships, and I think it's an ongoing challenge to deal with that many independent decision makers rather than
one school board.
EBR, for example, right, where you've got one school board and one district leadership that is heavily engaged in building those partnerships.
It makes sense. Please feel free to rely on myself and the chairman here. I mean, I doubt very seriously there are any of the charter school boards where he and I can't identify someone we know on any of those charter school boards. I'm pretty sure I know somebody on every single charter school board in the city of New Orleans.
What I'm wondering is, do we together set a meeting in New Orleans where we try to bring together all those, someone from each of those, let's try to create a real task force around it, and you and I, with partnership of the staff here, try to present this as a priority. Maybe we get some other legislators or others from the area to participate as well.
Honestly, I think what needs to happen is that we all need to look at the areas that we represent, and we all need to do that in our respective areas.
Sure.
And call the meeting of decision makers. I mean, because once again, that's part of the reason why we're here, is to use our resources to try to further the things that, from an education perspective. So, we'll let y'all pilot it and let us know how to do it.
Collis is a great way of just tossing the gavel over this way.
You made the suggestion.
And we're certainly happy to help assist in any way.
Sure.
You just need to let us know.
Thank you.
Great. So that was for informational purposes only. We got obviously a lot of information. Dr. Lowe, thank you for that. Thank you for jumping in as well, Dr. Craig. And it doesn't require any action on our part. So members, also, thank you all. Member session started a little over 2 weeks ago. And I'm sorry, Adam, are you done? Okay, all right, I'll just jump to the next thing. If you weren't done, you're done now, right? So, a little over 2 weeks ago, and staff is deeply engaged with a number of bills this session. So now we'll get a chance to hear an update on several of those bills that we're tracking. So Bree, thank you, ma'am. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm back.
Yes.
All right. Just as Regent Temple mentioned, session started on March 11th, and I will say they have hit the ground running. Literally as soon as 2 days after session gavelled in, one of our bills got heard into committee. So we have been definitely treading the course at the Capitol and have been working extremely hard. So first I want to start off with letting you know, informing you all about our legislative priorities. One of them, Workforce Solutions, Senate Bill 293 by Senator Edmonds. This would authorize the Louisiana Workforce Commission to coordinate the delivery of business workforce solutions in coordination with various partners and educational agencies across agencies of the state. The Board of Regents has been named as one of those partners, and we will be working closely with other agencies such as LCTCS, the Department of Education, DCFS, LED, and corrections as well, to do some cross-agency collaboration with Louisiana Workforce Commission at the helm guiding this work. Senate Bill 352 by Senator Mizell and HB 551 by Representative Brass. This deals with career and technical education. This bill would expand the scope of the Dual Enrollment Task Force by allowing them to recommend options for expanding career and technical education and virtual instruction programs to increase participation of dual enrollment course offerings across the state, in school districts across the state of Louisiana, and it also expands task force membership to provide for one member of the Louisiana Association of Career and Technical Education to sit on the task force. HB 410 by Representative Brass This would increase the threshold for post-secondary institutions and consortiums, as well as other agencies, to submitting projects to one of 3 professional service selection boards, whether it's architectural board, engineering, or landscaping. It takes that threshold amount from $500,000 and increases it to $1 million to mirror the authority granted to the institutions and consortiums to manage projects with a budget up to $1 million or less. Senate Bill 353 by Senator Barrow. This revises current power-based violence laws to shift reporting dates for campuses on employee training on power-based violence. Transitioning over to bills requiring Board of Regents involvement or implementation. And these are some bills that we are obviously monitoring, tracking, because Board of Regents would have to take action on this. HB 283 by Representative Schlegel. This concerns human trafficking. This requires the Board of Regents to identify and establish anti-human trafficking training materials for use in instruction on the recognition, prevention, and effective reporting of human trafficking by applicants as a requirement to obtain a commercial driver's license. HB 606 by Representative Jordan. This concerns a midwifery and doula program. This would allow the Southern BR School of Nursing to offer midwifery and doula program, which would be then subject to Board of Regents approval.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I looked at your face. Can you just, I know this is probably very elementary, but
Go back. Go ahead.
can you explain that a little bit more? The midwifery and doula program?
Can I phone a friend who can
Well,
explain
let me,
a
I
little
can,
bit?
I can help my colleague.
Thank you, Regent Sterling.
We have maternal deserts in our state. We have areas in our state that there is not an OBGYN physician. And so midwives and doulas, those who assist women with natural birth, is a training that will help to make sure that that our women in our state have access to those related services.
Are there any other programs like that anywhere else in the state?
There is not that I'm aware of.
Great. Thanks. I know a lot of y'all, other people wanted to ask too, and y'all just didn't, so
Mr. Temple, and Ms. Sterling, you probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Louisiana leads the nation in
infant mortality.
Infant mortality and the mother's mortality, especially in communities of color.
Yes, that is correct.
The highest rates in the nation.
Yes.
I guess my question, Mr. Chairman, is why does this have to be in legislation?
So we always visit with the legislators to see. When they choose to put it in legislation, we always say subject to Regents' approval. Obviously, it's important that we not codify all academic programs in legislation, nor set a precedent to keep doing that. But we're always in conversation to try to, see what we can do on those issues. Sometimes, as you know, a legislator just wants a signature issue to
I was about to say, it was
elevate the
just to be able to
conversation.
say, I did this.
Yeah, to elevate
Okay.
the conversation. So we're balancing that, sir.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions on that one? All right. HB 615, Representative Stagney, Hero Fund expansion. This expands the use of Hero Funds for doctors of medicine, osteopathy, physician assistants, and advanced practice registered nurses in shortage areas. Senate Bill 59 by Senator Fields. This will require student athletes access to mental health counseling at each post-secondary institution in accordance with guidelines established by the Board of Regents, and this would also require an additional annual report on the effectiveness of the implementation of this law across the post-secondary systems. Senate Bill 363 by Senator Kuzan. This is about occupational experience. So this changes the occupational experience requirement for instructors of technical or occupational courses at proprietary schools from 3 years to 4 years.
Quick question, do we know the access already to mental health when we're putting it in legislation that high school athletes can get it? What about the rest?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that second part.
You mentioned mental health counselors in this legislation for student athletes.
Mm-hmm.
do we know the access for everybody else while we're gonna put in legislation, those special,
When you say everyone else outside of.
that's not a student athlete, the rest of the student population count?
If my colleague, Dr. Allison Smith, was here, who is the Assistant Commissioner of Health and Wellness, she would be able to give a more informed answer on that. At
Okay.
this time, I don't know, but I can get that information to you.
Thank you.
No problem. Financial aid and eligibility bills that we're monitoring. Computer science, HB 266 by Representative Amade. This removes the option to take 2 units of computer science in lieu of a foreign language, and instead adds computer science to a list of accepted science electives to the core curriculum for TOPS. HB 452 by Representative St. Blanc. This would phase out TOPS Tech by academic year 2029-2030. HB 548 by Representative Amade. This is regarding home study requirements. So this subjects students who complete an approved home study program and satisfy the TOPS core curriculum and GPA requirements to the same ACT requirements as graduates of public and approved non-public high schools.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Regarding HB 452, if we're after workforce development, why would they want to phase out TOPS Tech by 2030?
So I can answer that. On the next slide, you see 2 MJ Foster bills, if you'll advance that. So the conversation, there's 3 pieces of legislation that may come together. MJ Foster is high demand, high wage, 21 and older. So you see there's a bill by Representative Davis to lower the age. TOPS Tech has been underutilized, so there's an interest in phasing it out. And then Senator Edmonds has a bill to increase the amount for MJ Foster. So the conversation across some legislators is to have TOPS as an academic financial aid merit-based program, and MJ Foster as the career technical program with no age limit. So they'd be bifurcated as 2 different programs instead of having TOPS Tech and MJ Foster. So
Okay.
it's an evolving conversation, but that's why you see those 3 bills.
So it's more like a migration of the funding in a different form
Right,
now.
right,
Okay.
right.
Well, on MJ Foster, HB 728, Representative Davis, this lowers the minimum age for initial MJ Foster eligibility from 21 to 17 and removes the requirement to not have been convicted of a violent crime in order to be eligible for receiving MJ Foster funding. And Senate Bill 272 by Senator Edmonds, this increases the maximum appropriation for MJ Foster not to exceed $40 million and limits proprietary schools to 25% of the appropriation of that funding. And for other bills of interest, this is regarding financial disclosure. It's Senate Bill 30 by Senator Miller. This adds the types of assets to be disclosed in ethics disclosure forms, and this actually includes tiers 1 and 2. For additional information on that, I'll ask that Uma come up.
Good morning. As you all know, the Board of Regents members and members of the Higher Education Management Boards filed Tier 2.1 ethics disclosure. This bill does not affect it. It affects Tiers 1 and 2. Tier 1 applies to the Commissioner along with the other cabinet level members and the Superintendent of Higher Education. So Tier 1 is for certain designated office holders, including the Commissioner. Tier 2 is for elected officials from parishes smaller than a certain number of people, unless any of the board members fall under Tier 2, such as our Regent Levy did a few years ago when he was an elected official. This bill does not affect the Board of Regents members or any of the management board members. It does apply to the Commissioner, and the changes are fairly minimal. It increases the threshold for disclosure from 1,000 to 5,000 for certain types of transactions, and it adds 2 different types of assets to the disclosure form. All of this will be distilled in the ethics disclosure form that the Board of Ethics will announce once the law goes through. So it'll be operationalized in that fashion. So, but right now this is a bill that affects the Commissioner of Higher Education and the presidents of the system. So that's why it's on our list.
Thank you, Uma. Oh, stay here for this one. And then lastly, there was a bill that was filed yesterday that Uma will go into detail about, Senate Bill 403 by Senator Fazy.
Bree asked me to cover this. This was filed yesterday late afternoon by Senator Fazy, and it affects the management boards and the appointment of the selection of the board chairs. Currently, all five higher education boards, the 4 management boards and the Board of Regents, by law, the members elect their chair. So this board, as you know, elects its chair each year, as do the 4 management boards. And in 2 cases, the LCTCS system and the LSU system, the vice chair elected by the board members serves as the chair for the next year. So the vice chair is by law the chair-elect for the following year. All of that is in current law. Also in current law is the appointment of the Commissioner of Higher Education, which this board does under current law. So the bill will change the selection of the board chair for all 5 higher education boards. Effective August 1, 2024, the governor appoints the chair of each of the 5 higher education boards, the 4 management boards and the Board of Regents, effective August 1, 2024. And then for those 2 boards, LCTCS and LSU, where the vice chair automatically becomes the chair-elect for the following year, that provision is deleted. So there is no automatic moving into the chair position for the vice chair for those 2 boards. And in addition, within 60 days of taking office, the governor appoints the Commissioner of Higher Education. That will not go into effect until 2028 because it's already past the 60-day period for the 2024 term. So that provision of the bill will go into effect in 2028. So that's what the bill does.
The proposed bill.
Excuse me.
The proposed bill.
The proposed bill, yes.
Right, okay.
It's filed. It's filed.
Senate Bill 403. 403.
Who was the author?
Senator Fazy, Mike Fazy.
It was just filed yesterday afternoon.
Okay, so, anything else? Okay, so, any other questions? All right, is there any other business to come before this committee? Because that was for informational purposes only. All right, so hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Motion by Regent Gill, second. Thank you. Any discussion, any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Regent Temple. Always a lively committee during this time of year.
Always.
Next up is Facilities and Properties Committee. Regent May is not in attendance today, so I'd like to call on Vice Chair of that committee, Regent Weil. Regent Weil, will you please call your committee to order, sir?
Thank you, Chair Solomon. The Facilities and Property Committee will come to order. Mr. Herring, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Chair May, Vice Chair Weil.
Here.
Regent Aubrey.
Here.
Regent Levy. Here. Regent Meir.
Present.
Regent Seal.
Here.
Regent Temple.
Here.
Supervisor Jackson. Here. Supervisor Tarver.
Here.
Supervisor Werner.
Here.
and UL System representative. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. First is item 3, the consent agenda, including small capital and third-party projects. Chris, please proceed with that.
Yes, sir. The next few slides contain small capital projects and one third-party project that have been approved since our last report to the committee. These represent projects, again, that are under the $1 million threshold, funded by the institution themselves, and we simply report these back to you guys on the consent agenda. If there are any questions, though, on any of these projects, I'd be happy to answer.
Is there a motion to accept?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. All right, the next item is item 4, a review of the Act 959 exterior stair connector project at LSU Health Sciences Center, New Orleans. Chris?
Yes, sir. For the benefit of our new Regent member, I will state that the 959 projects allow an institution to move forward with a capital project up to $10 million as long as the funding source is not derived from the state. So we have this project at Health Science Center New Orleans. They would like to construct a stair connector between the Seton Clinic and the Center for Advanced Learning and Simulation buildings. I know a few of you have been to the Center for Advanced Learning and Simulation and seen the fantastic renovation that occurred finally after Hurricane Katrina. The campus relies on elevated walkway structures to move students and staff throughout the property. It's a safer method of transportation getting between buildings, and this is essentially a vertical stairwell that will connect the Seton Clinic with the new newly renovated Center for Advanced Learning and Simulation. It will also provide a direct access point to the Seton Clinic from the upper level once the connector and the elevated stairway wells are in place. The project's going to be a little over $1.4 million, and it's funded with revenues generated from clinic and doctor contract operations. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we recommend approval of this project as well.
Members, you've heard the recommendations. Is there a motion? Regent Levy? Second? All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now, we have item 5, and which is an update of House Bill 2. Chris?
Yes, sir. So House Bill 2, which is the state's capital construction bill, was released to the House, or by the House of Representatives last Wednesday. The bill has not started moving its way through committees, but that should be forthcoming soon. You'll see a slide on the screen that summarizes the number of projects receiving new capital funding for the upcoming fiscal year. There are 90 higher ed projects with an appropriation in House Bill 2. 30 of those 90 are receiving new dollars, whether that's priority 5 to 1, cash, a combination of both for fiscal year 25. Some of those that are in the bill that did not receive cash this year are new money, are under design, and simply just were not expected to spend additional dollars in the upcoming fiscal year, or they had self-generated dollars that were being used to fund the front-end portion of the project. So FP&C performed an analysis of cash flows over the last few months leading up to the session, which resulted in the projects you see reflected on the slide above. I'd be happy to answer any questions on a specific project or system. I'll continue to keep everybody updated as these things move forward. I usually update a file I have related to each project and funding source after it moves past a particular committee.
All right, are there any questions from the committee? I have a question. Is deferred maintenance under this House Bill 2? Or
In years past, yes, we have received $50 million the previous 2 years and $25 million the year before that for deferred maintenance. As it stands right now, there is not any deferred maintenance money in House Bill 2. At the same time, we're working on another avenue to approach that. We've had discussions with the division and facility planning about a possible bond issuance to cover deferred maintenance needs, which would be on a much grander scale than the $50 million that we've received annually the last 2 years. So there's more to come, hopefully soon on that front as well.
okay. Any other questions? This was for informational purposes only, and it does not require any action by our committee. Is there any other business to come before the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I have one question.
Yes,
As Chris,
Regent
I had a speaking engagement on the campus of Grambling to some students, and I noticed that they still have the windows around the exterior parts on all 4 sides of the building. Just, is there anything you care to share, or simply for me, do we think this library could get open this year? That's still another conversation.
Now, Regent Aubrey, why didn't you ask that question when we had Rick Gallo in this room?
Yeah. Yeah, he left. Well, we can talk about it next month, but just an update.
I don't think it has to wait till next month, but I
Oh.
want to make sure we get the latest.
Correct.
So if you don't have the latest, let's try to get it for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have the latest.
Okay.
The last I heard, there was still some negotiation and discussion going on relative to the front of the building where all the glass is.
Okay. Okay.
Any other business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. Any discussion, any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned.
All right, thank you, Regent Weil. And next up is the Academic and Student Affairs Committee. I'd like to ask Regent Sterling to please call this committee to order.
Yes, ma'am. Regent Sterling. Regent Creed. Regent Aubrey.
Here.
Regent Finley.
Are you able to speak into the microphone so we can hear you?
Oh,
We can barely hear
I
you.
am so sorry. Regent Pryor. Regent Pryor.
Here.
All right. Apparently I've got to swallow the microphone. That'll be cool. Regent Williams-Brown.
Here.
Regent Gill.
Here.
LCTCS representative. LSU representative. Southern representative.
Here.
And UL representative. So you have a quorum.
Thank you, Dr. Denley. Now we'll move on to the consent agenda items. Dr. Denley, please proceed.
So we just have a short consent agenda today, just consisting of 6 items. 2 of those are approvals to take a program 100% online. 3 that are changing either degree designations or are changing the name of the program, and then 1 program termination. So senior staff recommend the approval of those items on the consent agenda.
I move that we approve.
Motion by Regent Aubrey, second. Second. Second by Regent Williams-Brown. Any discussion, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Now we will move on to item 4, academic programs. Dr. Denley, please continue.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so we have 4 programs for your consideration today. As you'll remember, back in September when we brought for your approval all of the academic plans from all of the campuses, most of those academic plans were really focused on trying to find ways to meet the capacity needs of the state. Areas where we have, really a burning critical capacity issue to try to create newly trained folk for the most needed occupations across the state. All of what I'm going to present for you today really was part of those academic plans and really fits that exact bill. The first 2, as you can see, are programs around cardiovascular care. They are the first 2 programs at the associate level that would train people to work in cardiovascular medicine. The first of those is at Fletcher to train people to be cardiovascular sonographers. So training them to be able to sit for both the vascular ultrasound certification and the cardiac ultrasound echocardiogram certification. So really highly needed skills in the state. The second of those 2 programs is at Delgado Community College. This is an associate degree in invasive cardiovascular technology. So this is really training people who can be part of catheterization procedures. I practice saying that, but apparently not enough. And so both of these skill sets are incredibly important across the state, very much needed in their areas, but of course actually very much needed across the state. So those are the first 2 programs. The third is a Bachelor of Music in Music Therapy. So this is a new program at LSU State University. I don't need, I'm sure, to tell you the national and international prominence that LSU's music program has. So this would be a departure from their usual offerings, but instead to now train people to work in mental health around music therapy. And so this would be the first program in the state at the bachelor's level in a public institution. There is a small program at Loyola, but this would be the first program in our state at in the public institution. These programs are gaining ground across the country, but this would also be the first program in this region. You have to go all the way out to Georgia to find another program that is offered at a public institution. And then the fourth program today is a bachelor's degree in computer engineering at Southern University A&M. So again, top tier needs in the state to have capacity when we are training people in all kinds of computer technology kinds of skills. This would be a program not around computer science, like software kinds of computer science. This is on the hardware side. And so training people exactly in computer engineering. There is a cousin program at LSU, which is a well-established program, has been around for several years, but there is an enormous need for people with these skills. Of course, we heard earlier about the CHIPS Act. This is exactly training people to be able to have those kinds of skills. And I'm sure I don't need to persuade you that computer science, not only in Louisiana, but nationally, it has enormous shortages of folk who are minority, in all kinds of minorities. And so, again, recognizing the specific role of HBCUs in our state to be able to provide this program at Southern would be, I think, a tremendous addition. So, senior staff recommend approval of the academic programs as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Denley. Certainly all of those programs. Are there any questions for Dr. Our senior staff recommends approval of these new academic programs.
Madam Chair, I offer a motion that we approve each of those recommended programs.
Thank you, Regent Aubrey. We have a second from Regent Tindall. Thank you very much. Any discussion, any questions? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you so much.
Next, we'll move on to item 5, revisions to the governor's military effective premium.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so our last item today is making changes to our uniform policy that governs our governor's military and veteran-friendly campus program. So this was created as part of Act 53 in the regular session of last year, proposing changes to our existing program, creating the designation of military and veteran-friendly campuses. As I think I shared a few months ago when I gave the report for this, for several years now, all of our campuses have had this important designation, and so there is an opportunity for us to really be able to recognize all of the, you might imagine various different campuses are offering all kinds of additional services to this very important student population, and we want to both, on the one hand, recognize that additional services that campuses are providing, whilst also on the other hand, encouraging other campuses to begin offering those as well. And so this work was really to create that tier structures. You'll see there will be a gold, silver, and bronze tier of designation. It will still be the case that if a campus chooses to, that they can keep their initial designation. But of course, we would very much encourage campuses to be able to begin adding these various different services. The tiers are built around 7 specific offerings to military and veteran students, and you can see all the different ways in which those services are creating really a wraparound structure for those students. So everything from having a veteran center, a place for veteran students to be able to get together and build community with one another, creating a buddy system that enables an existing military student to be able to provide a support structure to a new incoming student. A campus providing dedicated financial aid and advising services that specifically serve military and veteran students. You can imagine that there are some specific details in serving those students, and it's very important to have exactly that training and that experience. Counseling support specifically designed for veteran students. I'm sure I don't need to persuade you of the need for those kinds of services for all of our students, but specifically for this population. Specifically designed degree pathways that recognize military experience, really recognizing all of the different kinds of trainings that military students might have when they arrive on campus, and what are the ways in which we can provide college credit for that and knit that into the curricula that we have. Providing flexible course-taking formats. Of course, these are people who might be called away at any moment, and so having a flexible way for them to be able to take those college courses is just really important. And then lastly, a separate graduation event for veteran students. This is not a separate event like everybody else is going to graduate over there and these students will graduate over here. No, this is an additional ceremony to really recognize the achievements of these students. And so this is the way in which this tier criteria is built. To have bronze status, we ask that you offer 2 of those services. To get silver status, you must have the Veterans Center, and then at least another 3 of those services, and then a gold status, all of the above to get that gold status. So we're excited about this. As you might imagine, we have worked really closely with all of the 4 systems, and also Levette Corps, which is a statewide organization that serves this student population. Everyone is very much in support of moving forward in this way, and we're really looking forward to seeing ways that we can recognize the terrific work that's already happening on campuses, but of course future work that we hope that this will incent. So with that, senior staff recommend the approval of these revisions to this uniform policy for governor's military and veteran-friendly campuses.
Congratulations on this innovative and competitive competition project to continue to make our campus
Little competition is always a good thing.
Are there any questions from any of our?
I do have a question. As a veteran, I want to commend you as well for the work that's being done and the recognition of veterans. I do still have a question about the graduation event. I think that for most veterans, what would be, this would be special, but recognition at the ceremony, for example, their rank, time of service. But what is the mindset? Like, what event would be in place on the graduation day? Because most people, when they're graduating, are just really interested in being at that ceremony with family and friends. Is it before the event or?
Yeah, so it's quite common on a university and college campus to have a variety of sort of events that happen, as well as the sort of, the moment when you walk across the stage and actually get your diploma. It's very common to have another ceremony perhaps at your college, or very often this happens at honors colleges. So it's those kinds of events that are envisaged. Actually, when I was on a campus, I was on a campus that had a very large military population, and we created such an event. We actually had some military coins printed that had some challenge coins that had the crest of the institution, and so the president was there and gave a challenge coin to each of the graduates, and certainly people very much valued that. Again, this is not in any way to devalue the graduation moment, but it's really to give that special recognition to people who often have overcome quite considerable challenges to be able to graduate in the way that they do. Yeah.
I would just like to add, I'm very excited about this because I have witnessed as a supervisor at LSU the challenges our young veterans especially who become non-traditional students but often still in their 20s and early 20s have accessing all the available financial aid that it is out there. That if they don't have a parent at home, they've often gone off and had a career, now they're coming back, maybe they're in Baton Rouge away from family. They don't have a high school advisor to help them through this process, and so I'm very excited to see the academic advising, but especially the financial aid advising, because there's funding out there to help these individuals outside of, they've lost their tops because they didn't go straight from high school to LSU or McNeese or wherever, accessing that availability. So I think this is an extremely important component, and I commend the work on this entirely, and hope that all the LSU campuses can rise to some sort of status in this, but also for the services that are going to be available to these students who are committed to finishing their education. Thank you.
I believe your colors are silver and gold, so this.
I'm hoping, and LSUE recognizes our veterans with a special cord and not a special ceremony, but a cord, and then they are introduced at graduation in that ceremony. So on a smaller campus, that's how it works. But on a larger campus, possibilities are endless.
Yeah, and I think, at least what's envisaged here is not necessarily, if it were at a graduation event where, you ask all the veteran students to stand up and there's exactly these kinds of things are the kinds of things we're trying to see.
Any other questions or comments? Members, you've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
So moved and second. Any additional discussion or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Dr. Denley, is there any other business to come before this committee? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Regent Sterling. All right, next up is Research and Sponsored Initiatives Committee. Regent Finley, will you please call your committee to order?
I'd like to call the Research and Sponsored Initiative Committees to order. Ms. Robinson, will you call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Chair Finley,
Present.
Vice Chair May, Regent Cordell, Regent Meir,
Present.
Regent Pryor, Regent Weil.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. On the agenda today is the appointment of endowed chairholders with the National Search and Reinstatement of Temporary Moratorium on Waivers. It's item 3. Ms. Robinson, will you please proceed?
Yes, so many of you will remember this item from meetings past, but I'd just like to begin by giving you a brief précis of the Endowed Chairs for Eminent Scholars program of the Board of Regents Support Fund, so you understand the context in which we're taking up this item today. The Endowed Chairs program is the only constitutionally mandated endowment program in the Board of Regents Support Fund, which is a constitutionally dedicated fund. The full name of the program, as I said, is the Endowed Chairs for Eminent Scholars program. It is the jewel of our endowment programs. It matches the $600,000 minimum non-state private match with $400,000 from the Board of Regents Support Fund to create an endowed chair that is required to host an eminent scholar, an eminent senior scholar, so associate's professor level or above, who is doing very high-level, nationally recognized work in the field in which the chair is created. The chairs, there are 326 chairs established statewide at 26 different institutions, and the chairs span the gamut of disciplines, everything from music business to cancer research. So the chair holders do everything. It is the focus on senior faculty is very important, and it's intentional. The purpose of the endowed chairs is to make Louisiana competitive in a national market for faculty, for the best and brightest senior faculty who are out there. Senior faculty who can come in, mentor our junior faculty, mentor our students, and raise the capacity and competitiveness of Louisiana institutions in both research and education. So that's the context in which these requests come forward. Because of the focus of the Endowed Chairs program, a national search is required. The national search does not mean that an internal candidate can't be appointed to an endowed chair. It simply means that that candidate has to win the national search. So this is to ensure that we get the very best candidates, we understand the market, and the very best people are appointed to these chairs. That maintains the status of the chairs. The faculty holders love that these chairs confer a great deal of prestige and status with them. They love putting that title in their signature line, and we want to make sure that that status is maintained, but also that we're getting the quality and talent that we need. So in this framework, we have in the policy a provision to appoint an endowed chairholder without a national search. This should be used very rarely by the campuses, and only when the candidate being put forward checks every box. We have a list of qualifications required of every chairholder. This provision requires that anyone put forward by a campus to not undergo a national search checks every box that we have in those qualifications. We requested a few months ago in September a moratorium on consideration of these requests for waiver of a national search. The reason that we requested this moratorium was these waivers were coming monthly. They were coming very often from a variety of campuses, but some campuses more than others. They were not being used rarely, but very frequently to fill these slots. So the board approved a waiver to extend through the spring until the staff could bring comprehensive recommendations for policy revisions to the endowment program policies in general, and around this issue in specifically the endowed chairs policy in particular. So we have been delayed in doing that because of the iterative nature of the policy development process. We have been reaching out and meeting with people all across the state to discuss policy provisions, their policy recommendations for us, and we've been delayed in bringing final recommendations to this board. In the meantime, we've had 3 requests from 3 different campuses in the LSU system to fill endowed chairs without conducting a national search. We have sent these through our usual review process. The reviewer has determined that these meet all the criteria for the current policy for waiver, and because the campuses were told in the spring we would lift the moratorium and consider these again, we recommend that the board consider these appointments at LSU Ag Center, LSU A&M, and LSU Health Sciences Center, New Orleans. That you consider approval of these 3 appointments, but also alongside that consider approval of the reinstating the moratorium until the fall. We expect to bring to you policy recommendations for your consideration in August, no later than September, so we're asking that you extend the moratorium until the fall of 2024. That is the recommendation before you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment and want to share with Regents as well as the commissioner. I had the opportunity to accompany Carrie with a meeting with LSU Health Sciences in regards to this topic. Of course, her expertise in this was ever present, and really she was able to work through many of the questions about how we administer, how you and your team administer a very complex set of requirements, and she certainly did an outstanding job and made her team proud as well as this board. So just want to recognize Carrie for her exceptional leadership in a complex area. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Members, you've heard the recommendation of the senior staff that we approve the request for waiver to appoint and endow chairholders as listed on the screen. In addition, the senior staff recommends reinstatement of a temporary moratorium on consideration of requests made under this policy provision effective immediately until the staff recommendations for related policy revisions are considered by the board. Is there a motion to approve the recommendations?
So moved.
We have a motion by Regent Weil. Is there a second? Is a second by Regent Cordell. Any other discussion? Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The motion passes. Now we'll move on to other business. Is there any other business to come before this committee? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Regent Muir. Is there a second? Second by Regent Cordell. Any discussion? Well, no discussion on that. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Bentley. Next up is the Statewide Programs Committee, and we'll ask Regent Pryor to please call this committee to order.
First of all, at the next meeting, if we could get the larger screens for Dr. Carver, Mr. Jackson, and myself. It's hard to keep up with the meeting on these little. And Ms. Brown probably did it too. See that? I'd like to call the statewide programs committee to order. Ms. Robinson, will you call the roll?
Okay, is it okay if I go ahead and call it? It's all right. Okay, all right, Chair Pryor.
Here.
Regent Levy. Vice Chair Creed. Regent Weil.
Here.
Regent Cordell. Welcome to the team. And Regent Gill.
Here.
We do have a quorum. All right.
Thank you. Our first action item is item number 3, the consent agenda.
Yes.
Dr. Butte, the floor is yours.
Okay, is it okay if I proceed with all consent agenda items and then do one motion in global?
That's fine with me.
Okay, great. All right. The first consent agenda item codifies into rulemaking Act 393 for the open meetings laws. You'll recall that you've already done that for the LATTA, for the ABLE, so this is doing the very same thing for the LASFA Advisory Board. The second consent agenda item is approval of TOPS exceptions. Regent Cordell, for those students that are on TOPS, they must maintain continuous full-time enrollment. That's 12 hours. They have to earn 24 hours at the end of the academic year. And if students have a reason for not being able to do that, then they can file an exception. The objective exceptions, it's like this is cut and dried, right? Those don't come to this committee. Those are an internal committee because it's one way or the other. You either have the documentation or you do not. The subjective exceptions, which is kind of the what had happened was, and the circumstances are going to vary. Those come to an internal committee, then they go to the LASFA Advisory Board, and then they come to this committee for final approval. So there were 17 cases for exceptions within this category that are on this consent agenda item. And the third consent agenda item is the home study exceptions. The legislature fortunately gave LASFA the opportunity to provide exceptions for students who did not begin a home study program by the end of the 10th grade.
Sometimes that student would become ill, sometimes that student was subjected to extreme bullying, sometimes students had anxiety issues with attending school and homeschool was better. And before we had this ability, we would have to deny those students eligibility for TOPS, no matter how good the reason was. You now have the ability to do that. There are 2 requests for exception under this category. And the LASFA Advisory Board has reviewed all of these consent agenda items, and they recommend approval.
Members, you've heard the recommendation from LASFA, and which stands for our new member, the Louisiana Office of
Student Financial Assistance.
Assistance
Yes, sir.
Advisory Board. Is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Is there a second? By Mr. Will, the motion that was second was a motion to approve by Mr. Gill. Is there any further questions or discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. The motion passes.
Okay.
Is there any other business to come before the committee?
No, sir.
I wanted to bring, has the issue of the admissions criteria of the different universities, how is that being, is that settled, or is there still a lot of consternation around what's going on the admission criteria as far as exceptions?
No, sir. There wouldn't be exceptions for LASFA that would come through LASFA for admission criteria.
Okay.
That doesn't go through us.
Okay. And who would it go through?
That would go through the institutions, and then I think there's a report to the Board of Regents on the number of exceptions or students admitted by exception. I would surmise that since you've expanded your admissions criteria, where individuals can satisfy admissions criteria by a number of different combinations, that isn't something that LASFA hears a lot of consternation about. But it isn't an exception that we handle. We handle the exceptions for TOPS.
Regent Pryor, let's ask Tristan perhaps to comment on this. I believe, Tristan, we have kind of a rotating calendar of review of the exceptions and reports back from the institutions, right?
That's
The
exactly
audits.
right. So we made some changes to our admission criteria back in the fall of '22. Those took effect initially for the class of the fall of '23, but really the bulk of those changes actually come into effect this coming fall, in the fall of 2024. That's when we retire some of the provisions that allowed campuses to be able to bring in lots more exceptions. As you say, there are within that admission policy particular numbers of students at each campus that are exceptions that they are allowed to admit. And then on an annual basis, we carry out a campus audit to see whether or not campuses are obeying those thresholds.
And do they appear to be obeying?
So actually that audit is being carried out right now, and I'm sure we'll be happy to share those when it's complete.
And when do you think those results will be completed?
So we just the way in which the data comes to us each year, we receive the information about the fall at the end of January normally, and then you can imagine the first order of business is actually you acted on it today, is to try to gather do all the analysis that we need to make sure that the formula can be satisfied. Now that formula is beginning to shape up, then we're able to move to the admission audit as part of the business we do.
Okay, thank you. And based on my question, is there any other discussion or questions on that issue? Thank you. Hearing none, oh yeah, Christmas trees. Yes, sir.
Supervisor Warren had said something earlier about veterans not being able to receive TOPS because maybe their deployment. And
Thank you.
is
I
that
was going to address that next.
Okay.
So if a student graduates high school, and then all students that are TOPS eligible have 1 year before they have to enroll for TOPS. If that student chooses the military as their career option, and they enlist in the military, they can, I like to fondly say, they can continue to enlist and come back when they're my age, and I've seen a couple of sunsets, and say, I want my TOPS. And if we have their DD 214, and they have been honorably discharged, then we are able to provide their TOPS for them. We are able to account for that in our projection model, and it has not caused any disruptions to it.
I have a follow-up on that. So it's honorable only, not general discharge?
It is not. There is one that is neither honorable nor dishonorable. At that point, we cannot accept that, and yes, we have brought that to the attention of legislators several years to say that in this instance, it doesn't allow us to do this. Is this something that someone would like to take a look at in a bill? But we're aware of it, and we've addressed it.
And Regent Creed, the reason I brought that up is I've had to work with numerous students who, as I was commendating the status in the Veterans Affairs and the Veterans Services, that don't know this information. And so if no one helped, there's not, sometimes when they get into a larger institution and they just think I've got to pay tuition, I don't know, or, they don't have specific veterans advising on helping them acquire the documentation they need in many circumstances of students I've worked with.
Is there any coordination going on with the Veterans Administration? I mean, there's a Veterans Administration in almost every area.
There isn't coordination that is, I would say, ironclad between one source of Veterans Administration and LASFA. There is an individual at LASFA who handles these exceptions or this eligibility. We have somebody that specializes in that, and in many instances that there are not issues with it. So what we do know is that individuals that are in need of assistance for whether it's wraparound services, whether it's, okay, so I qualify for TOPS, then I also qualify for National Guard, and then what do I get, right? Do I get Patriots as well? In those instances, those would be LASFA team members that they can come to. They can either send us a text, they can send us an email, they can say, I want a specific time for you to just talk to me. That's called a virtual office hour. They can say, and people have said, I don't do well on virtual. I want to come see you. And we say, make an appointment and come to the office and come on and do that. So that is the way that we would handle those individuals. Now, let's say that individual I have general financial aid questions that really are deeper than I want to just have somebody tell me on the phone or email what I can do. I might have housing and food insecurity and the like, okay? Then that gets into wraparound services, which is essentially case management. We have positions that we have designed under LASFA 2.0 specifically for that. They are called comprehensive advising officers. We are using the Salesforce platform, which is a case management system. So if they have come through it, I can tell you when that case was opened. I can tell you which comprehensive advising officer is working it, and I can tell you the status. So that is the way that we go from, it's like a triage. Do you have just a general question that we can answer via an email or a phone call? Is yours that's not quite case management, but it's a little bit more than I'm going to be able to handle, because individuals that are answering the phones, we've shifted, and that is all they do now, is answer the phones. We're not asking those individuals to answer the phones and run out in the field and do events. You can imagine how challenging that is with as much as we have to do. So then there's a second tier that says, okay, that's going to take a little bit of research. You're going to hand that off to this group.
And then there's a third tier that we know when they come in, it's like, yeah, this just goes straight to comprehensive advising. You need to open up a case, and in most cases, as soon as that student says, I'm gonna fill out this little form and say, I want you to work with me, that's immediate, that begins that day. So that's our contribution to it. Certainly, if you have folks on your campuses, right, for the representatives that I can connect my team to, we are happy to engage in those deeper partnerships to say, okay, when it comes to the GI Bill or this or that, that's probably something you need to talk about. When it comes to TOPS, phone a friend, hand them over to us, and we'll make sure, because TOPS is, as you all can imagine, quite complex. You can say 2 or 3 sentences, and this is like, that just changed what I was getting ready to say to you. So we would prefer to do that, but yeah, happy to engage in as many partnerships as we can to better serve students.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other business to come before this committee?
Mr. Jackson, just curious, now that many of our universities have gone to a test option format for admission, has there been a discussion regarding whether or not we should look at other ways for students to qualify for TOPS other than the ACT? It seems as though if the institution is saying ACT is not necessary to evaluate students for admission, has there been any discussion about other ways to evaluate students for TOPS, which obviously might make TOPS more available to low-income students because we know they're going to do well? I'm just wondering, has that, seems like one would lead to a discussion on the other.
That issue would come from this board or the legislature. What LASFA's position would be, and yes, that question has arisen before, would be to provide you with the data, the information that says, okay, if you do this, these are the potential costs. Here is what I would say on the mic here or on the mic over there if I were asked that question, and I'm being doing now. The question has come up before this body as to whether there's any validity to requiring ACT for a merit-based program. Remember, TOPS is a merit-based program, as well as ACT and as well as a core. Here is what I would say to you. Look at your TOPS 1202 report. The average ACT in Louisiana is 18.2. Let that simmer. The average ACT for TOPS recipients, opportunity, performance, and honors, right, is a 24. So when you look at the ACTs are different, then we can look at the average GPAs, right? You're not seeing a whole bunch of glaring differences on GPAs. So if it's not ACT that's making the difference, then I would say, why is it that TOPS recipients graduated 63% compared to non-TOPS recipients who is significantly lower? That's whether you were looking at 4-year or you were looking at 6-year. So when you have recipients meeting a core, which ACT has a body of research that says, if you attempted the core, I don't care if you didn't make 4.0 on the core or 3.55 on the core, the fact that you attempted a rigorous curriculum is going to prepare you better academically. So that body of research exists. So when you take that body of research along with the body of research that says these are actual results for recipients, there is a significant difference. And your factor is the ACT in a state where the average is 18.2 and these students are 24. As I've said before multiple times, there isn't a substitute for post-secondary education for preparation. Financial aid gives you an opportunity to attend. Preparation gives you the tools that you need to stay and not have to stop out because of your academics and incur loan debt that you do not have a job to pay off. Those are personal opinions based on data that we work with every day. So when we start to talk about the students, let me just say this, underrepresented students for TOPS, no matter who they are, whether it is ethnicity, whether it is academic preparation, whether it is income. I would strongly encourage, if you were deeply interested in that conversation, that you would read the legislative auditor's report. This is a public document, so not making this up, that examines the nature of the public schools in the state of Louisiana, particularly in areas of limited income neighborhoods of color. It basically says to you, you have more subs, as in full-time sub. Is that a thing? Yeah, it's a thing. And you have a higher percentage of teachers that are not as certified, right? And you usually have an overrepresentation of poverty. So best example, let's say this neighborhood, typically limited income, has a 50% representation of limited income students. That report said that those students are going to be in public schools where there's a 75% or 80%, and I'm making up numbers, but you get my point. The poverty is overrepresented in that school. So if you don't see anybody else that is achieving any differently than you are, you know, what does that say to you? Right, that becomes your new normal. So I think we have to, and again, I'm passionate about the students that we serve, and I would strongly encourage you not to put somebody in this job that's not, and about this program. Because basically, we've got to give to Caesar what is Caesar's, right? Give to the system that has had 13 years to prepare them, and make it accountable for doing so. And then say, for those who were prepared and got this award because they earned it upon high school graduation and prepared, none of the data suggests that they do worse. All of the data suggests that they do better. So if you did eliminate the ACT and you go to GPA because you already have core, then I would say that examine the guardrails that you're going to use to prevent grade inflation as well as grade deflation, because that's just as dangerous as inflation. So those would be my comments based upon what we do every day, the cases that we see every day, experience, and the data that this body, your team, puts together for the legislature. And it's called the TOPS 1202 report. It's on the Regents website.
Supervisor Jackson, we'll get you and this body,
Yes.
both the TOPS report and the legislative report, audit report that you mentioned. We'll share that with all of you. Thank you.
You know, save the ring.
Y'all are kind of getting worse than Senate Finance here today. I'm like, okay. But I appreciate your questions. They're important issues.
Thank you. Is there any other business that come before this committee? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Creed, and is there a second by Mr. Gill? Any other discussion or any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Boutte.
Well, thank you, Regent Pryor. Next up is the Planning, Research, and Performance Committee, which will be followed by lunch. So Regent Williams-Brown, will you please call your committee to order?
Thank you. I'd like to call the Planning, Research, and Performance Committee to order. Dr. Craig, will you call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Regent Williams-Brown.
Here.
Regent Aubrey.
Here.
Regent David.
Here.
Regent Levy. Regent Sterling.
Here.
Regent Cordell.
Here.
Regent Gill.
Here.
Ma'am, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Our first item is number 3, the consent agenda. Dr. Craig, please proceed.
Sure. So the consent agenda is very short this morning and very typical of what the PRP agenda is. We have for you this morning, there are 3 renewal applications for academic degree granting institutions that operate that are based outside of Louisiana. So the first one is California State University, Northridge. They have 14 online programs in various disciplines. They are accredited by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. High Tech High Graduate School of Education has one master's degree program in educational leadership. Interestingly enough, that one is, they have 16 high schools across the country. They have one master's degree that's embedded in the work that they do at each of those high schools. Also accredited by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. We only have one Louisiana student currently enrolled. And excuse me for saying California State University has 0 students enrolled right now at this moment. William Carey University is out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. However, they operate a school here in Baton Rouge at the Baton Rouge General Mid-City. It is a BS in nursing and currently have 102 students enrolled. If you'll handle that for me, thank you. The second item on the consent agenda is from our Proprietary Schools Advisory Commission. We have 2 initial applications. The Feliciana Medical Training Academy, which will be operating in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and then Trinity Bay Vocational Institution, Institute in St. James. Feliciana Medical Training Academy is phlebotomy, as well as the Trinity Bay Vocational Institute is oh, I didn't look at that really quick.
That is related to plant work.
Yes.
The plant maintenance.
Process technician. It is also, they have a school in Houston, and the person who runs the school in Houston is from St. James Parish, so he is actually bringing it to St. James Parish to help facilitate the plants in that area. There are 15 license renewal applications that you'll see on your agenda, a variety of them. Senior staff recommends approval of the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve those three renewal applications, 2 initial and the 15 renewal of the proprietary.
Second by? Okay. Any discussion, any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion passes.
Our next, oh, I'm sorry.
Our next item is item 4, the proprietary school adjudicatory hearing result. Courtney Britton will present the result. Ms. Britton, you may proceed.
Good morning, or it's afternoon now. I know you're ready for lunch. The next PRP item is the adjudicatory hearing held before the Proprietary Schools Commission. TDS Truck Driving Training and Technology is a business operated by Tamika Willis in Patterson, Louisiana. They operated without a proprietary school license, a CDL training program, and after staff sent a cease and desist letter, they continued to operate the program, promote it, and that's when a hearing was scheduled before the Proprietary Schools Commission. Prior to that hearing, we did enter into a stipulation agreement with Ms. Willis. So at the hearing on January 31st, we presented as evidence the stipulation agreement and the charge letter. The commission did vote to accept the stipulation agreement, which outlines the 3 violations here as operating a proprietary school without a license, providing courses of instruction without a license, and advertising without a license. The commission recommends the penalty presented in the stipulation agreement of $1,500. Senior staff recommends the board accept the recommendations of the commission, including the stipulation agreement and fine, based on the record of proceedings conducted before the commission.
So members, we have the stipulation executed by the TDS Trucking School that staff recommends for our approval. The options of this committee are to either approve the stipulation or reject it. If we reject it, the matter will then go back to the Proprietary School Advisory Commission for an adjudicatory hearing. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
David, second?
Second.
Aubrey. Any discussion, any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Is there any other business to come before the committee?
No, ma'am.
Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Second. Any discussion, any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion passes. We are adjourned.
Excellent. Thank you all. Well, members, we're now going to break for a quick lunch. We'll return in this room for our full board meeting. Let's say 1:10 p.m. It gives us a nice 45 minutes. We are adjourned for lunch. Call the March Board of Regents meeting to order. Members, please remember we are being streamed live, so you'll need to turn on your microphones when you are recognized and speak closely and directly in the microphone so our virtual audience can hear you. We're going to move on now to call the roll, and I'll ask Doreen, please, to help with that.
Sir, Regent Aubrey.
Present.
Regent Cordell.
Present.
Regent Creed.
Yes, here.
Regent David. Regent Finley.
Here.
Regent Gill. Regent Levy. Regent May. Regent Meir.
Present.
Regent Pryor.
Here.
Regent Seal.
Here.
Regent Solomon.
Here.
Regent Sterling.
Here?
Regent Temple.
Here.
Regent Weil.
Here.
Regent Williams Brown.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you, Doreen. Doreen, we have public comments up next. Are there any to your knowledge?
There are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. And none in the audience. All right, hearing none. Members, you received a copy of the January 23 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion, please, to approve these minutes? I see Regent Temple and Regent Creed, first and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed saying nay. The motion passes. Now we're going to move on to the chair's comments. First, I wanted to acknowledge Sam Gill, our student board member, has left, I believe, for the day. Regent Cordell, usually we start the chair's comment section with passing the microphone to the student member to give an update from the student perspective. So you'll hear that next time we gather. Members, Regents has been very busy since we met last in January. We've held or participated in a number of important events. Many of you yesterday were with us and for the Board of Regents hosted trusteeship conference. It brought together higher ed boards as well as systems and campus presidents to learn more about the governor's priorities and the different legislative instruments that are impacting higher ed. Louisiana Workforce Commissioner Director Susie Shawen, who spoke to us in our last meeting, participated and moderated a great roundtable of the system presidents that focused on how workforce and higher ed can better align the delivery of post-secondary education to meet the workforce demand. We heard from a dynamic keynote speaker, Josh Davies. I don't know what he eats for breakfast, but we all should try that once. Who shared some of the lessons learned since the onset of the pandemic in 2020. Amazing the difference in our worlds in just 4 years' time and what higher education must do to remain relevant and responsive to both student and state workforce needs. Special thank you goes to our very own Regent Aubrey and AT&T for sponsoring our reception that followed. It was a really special reception celebrating 50 years of the Board of Regents. We were glad to welcome back a number of former regents, both student members and chairs alike. We heard from Roy O. Martin, who's a former chair, about his perspective on his time here, and so it was a really special day, and thanks to the staff and all who made yesterday possible. Last Tuesday was the annual HBCU Day at the Capitol, starting with a meeting of the HBCU Advisory Council and some recognition by the legislature of the great work that our HBCU institutions do and the students that they serve. As always, Regents is great at throwing a reception, and that one was especially fabulous. We highlighted students from each campus who were on hand to discuss their programs. I want to thank Pepsi and the Bayou Research Institute for their sponsorships of that. In February, Regents Pryor and Regent William Brown joined Deputy Commissioner Tristan Denley at LSU Shreveport for the for Chancellor Robert Smith's annual State of the University address. The address highlighted LSUS's record-breaking enrollment numbers, provided an opportunity for regents to learn about LSUS's expanding academic inventory, and we're very grateful for this board being so engaged and excited to do the work that showcases our institutions. Next, I want to invite Uma, our General Counsel Uma, to talk to us about some amendments to bylaws that we'd like for you to consider. I understand the process of voting on this item has an additional step, but I'm sure Uma can walk us through that well above my pay grade. So, Uma, when you're ready, if you could proceed to describe this bylaws process.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
In 2023, the law was amended to allow the Board of Regents to meet any time in January to conduct its first meeting of the year. Until then, the law stated that we had to meet on or before the second Monday of each year. So that our first meeting was to be conducted on or before the second Monday of each year. In 2023, the law allowed us more flexibility to meet any time in January. So our bylaws need to be amended to accord with state law. And this is a fairly simple change and one that is required by law anyway. So all we are asking is the board's approval to amend the bylaws to allow the board the same flexibility that the law now gives you to meet anytime in January, not on or before the second Monday of each year. So senior staff recommends board approval of this amendment to the bylaws.
Uma, thank you. So members, as you've heard, we have two options. Can you describe the option of doing this now and maybe waiting until the next meeting?
Any amendment to the bylaws, under the bylaws, require a 30-day notice to all members of the board before the amendment is adopted, or a waiver of such notice with a 2/3 vote of the board. Since this is a fairly simple amendment and one that is required by law anyway, one option you could consider is to waive notice with a 2/3 vote. And if you do that, then you can take the vote now. If you would rather wait and consider it as at the next meeting, you don't need a waiver. So those are the two options before you. You can either vote today to waive notice by a 2/3 vote and then take up the amendment for a vote, or wait until the next meeting to take up this amendment.
Thank you, Uma. So again, we have two options. One's to wait till the next board meeting to consider this minor change to the bylaws, or to waive the 30-day notice, since we think this is a minor change and one that's required anyway to align the bylaws with the law. I'd love to see us waive this 30-day notice in case this, in this case, which makes sense.
Regent Tallman, I move that we waive the 30-day notice and vote for the changes as recommended by the senior
Look at
staff.
Regent Finley just getting out there. I hear a first and I hear a second from Regent Creed and Finley. Yes, I.
2/3 of the board would be about 15, so we have to have 10 votes, or is it 2/3 of those?
2/3 of the members present.
All right. So I've got a motion from Regent Finley, a second from Regent Creed. Any objections? We're all in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, and now we're gonna need a voice vote. I'm sorry, I see now. We need a voice vote, I'm sorry, because this requires the 2/3. So let's do a voice vote. Uma, can you call the voice vote for us?
Regent Wyatt? Regent Finley? Regent Creed? Regent Cordell? Regent Temple?
Here? Yes.
Regent Aubrey?
Yes.
Regent David?
I'm here as well, and yes.
Regent Meyer?
Yes.
Regent Solomon?
Yes.
Regent Steele?
Yes.
Regent Sterling? Yes. Regent Williams Brown?
Yes.
So you have actually a unanimous vote of all members.
And Regent Pryor?
Regent Pryor?
Yes.
Yes. You have actually vote more than the 2/3 you need.
All right, great. Now we can take up the amendment itself, which simply removes the language on or before the second Monday. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. Removes that restriction and allows us to conduct the first meeting of the year anytime in the month of January. Do I have a motion? Regent Creed, do I have a second?
Second.
Second with Regent David. Any objection? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, without objection, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. That was some tricky footwork there. Next up, Regents, at this time, we're going to have our momentum update. This highlights our successful 2024 Momentum Summit that took place in February. Deputy Commissioner for Academic Affairs and Innovation, Dr. Tristan Denley, will cover this item. Tristan, please proceed.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, so as the chair pointed out, we had our Momentum Summit, our second Momentum Summit back in February of this year. We had roughly 450 people there, about 400 department chairs and deans, presidents, provosts, students, faculty, all together, all looking to try to improve student success on their own institution. So all I want to do is just take a few minutes to tell you about kind of what it is that we did in that summit, what the next steps are, and then really share with you kind of where that work is and now how it's going to be progressing. So as I say, this is all part and parcel of our pathway to 2030, our approach to trying to reach the state's attainment goal of 60% of our adult population having a credential. And so it's focusing in on that, improving college success. That's what the Momentum Summit was all about. What we did was we asked campuses to apply what we call the Louisiana Momentum Framework. This is a framework that we have designed to help campuses look at themselves in an important new way, to really try to unpack how it is that they can make their students be more successful. Of course, it's the case that everybody wants their students to be more successful, but just giving them a blank page and saying, hey, make your students be more successful, just doesn't help people to be able to do the work that needs to be done. So instead, what we've done is crafted this framework that begins with these 4, what we call structural threads of choice, pathways, milestones, and engagement, really recognizing these sort of themes of work that, first of all, students really need to know. Well, so why am I in college? What am I looking to try to do? What am I aiming to do here? They need to make a choice. We need to, when they make a choice, then enable them to have a really clear pathway from where they are to where they're going. And today, that pathway just doesn't end when they shake the president's hand. That pathway continues on to employment, and it doesn't begin when they're admitted. It begins long before that. So these pathways are now much longer. But regardless, these pathways have to have milestones where we recognize the kind of progress that people need to make, and also have steps in place when we recognize that something is afoot. I think I've shared with you before that students who, for instance, are able to pass their college math and English courses in the first academic year are 3 or 4 times more likely to graduate than students who are not able to do that. And so recognizing when that does and doesn't happen and taking appropriate action is crucial to enabling people to be successful. And then lastly, engagement. Higher education is not a sprint. It's really more like a marathon. And so ways in which we can help people really get knit to the programs that they are trying to accomplish all the way through is really crucial. And so that's the last of those structural threads. And then what we've done is to sort of shoot those through with what we call foundational strands, really recognizing that for campuses to put those initiatives in place, they really need to think carefully about the students that they are serving. We want strategies that work for everyone, not just for some of our students, but for all of our students. We want to make sure that as they are crafting those strategies, that they take into account really all of the ways in which students are now having to use their resources to be able to achieve these milestones and these credentials. Yes, that's money, but it may be time. It may be all of the resources. I mean, the reality is hungry students just don't learn well. And so recognizing all of the ways in which we need to take into account how students might afford the experience of higher education is really crucial. And then the last is learning mindset. So this is really bringing to bear the research that shows that how it is that students think about themselves as learners and how they interact with the learning environment around them is extraordinarily crucial to their success. So again, really trying to understand this, and as you can see, this is all from a student perspective. This is really putting ourselves in our students' shoes and really making sure we're able to serve them well. So this was the basic framework, and some of you will remember that we employed that last year at Momentum Summit 1, brought executive leadership teams together to take a look at that and to look at their campuses through that lens. At this summit, we had to work a little differently. But as I say, we had roughly 400 department chairs and deans as a different audience. It was an intentionally different audience. We wanted to now go down a level of implementation and really work with the people who are closer to the boots on the ground to really be able to put these initiatives in place. And so the summit was really set around 12 workshops, 12 specifically in design workshops that would help those department chairs and deans know, well, what do I do in my college, in my department, at my institution to implement these different kinds of strategies. And so we brought in 12 national experts, each of which were basically unicorns, just extraordinary experts knowing about the intersection between these threads and strands. So the kinds of things were, for instance, choice for everyone, developing strategies to serve all students, enabling all of our students to be able to make that deliberate and purposeful choice about, well, why am I in college? What am I trying to do? Similarly, in the everyone in pathways, using predictive analytics kinds of tools to really be able to know how do we serve all of our students well? How can we bring data to bear to make sure that we're able to serve the students that we need to in ways that we need to, creating the schedules that will serve them. In the milestones and affordability, so this was really taking a comprehensive look at what are ways in which we can serve students' basic needs, and how do those basic needs being met really enable them to be more successful. As I've shared, hungry students just don't learn well. And then across there in engagement, how are we able to really accelerate and broaden the availability of work-based learning kinds of experiences? We know that those experiences have an incredibly powerful impact, but we also know that there are many more students who would like to be part of those experiences than right now are able to avail themselves of them. So what can we do to try to broaden that access? And then the last, to take you through, are learning mindsets, really digging down in the classroom. How can we help faculty know, how do I use that kind of research in the ways in which I present the material in my classroom? And then lastly, how do we help faculty with understanding how to create educational experiences that allow students to connect what they're learning in the classroom with what they will do after they graduate, to make that transference of skill and knowledge. So those are the kinds of things that we were involved in. As you can see, there were lots of people there of all of our campuses. As I say, we had teams from all 28 campuses. Small campuses sent smaller teams. Bigger campuses sent bigger teams. I think the biggest team was about 60 people. Wow. So there were really there was really a remarkable amount of conviction to this work, and just a lot of energy in the room, or in the space. We had it at the River Center, which really turned out to work great. Bringing people to events like this is one thing. Getting them to do something with it is something else. You know, I think we've all been to events where you go and you listen, you go, well, that was interesting, and then you go back and that's kind of all it was. And so we're very committed with these kinds of events to make sure that that's not what happens, that instead everyone goes away having made commitments, plans, and so that's exactly what we did. We asked every campus throughout the events to come up with one big idea, one big next step that as a campus they would all rally behind. And so we got at the end of the second day, every team to take their picture with their big idea, and we are, as you might imagine, now collecting all of those big ideas and now helping all of those campuses stay committed to the promise that they made. Because again, I think we all know that a promise without a plan is just a wish. And so what we're doing is really holding people accountable to that. We, as well as folk from here in the state and the national experts, we invited really a who's who of national figures, so folk from the National Association of System Heads, from SHIO, the State Higher Education Executive Officers Group, you can see George Mahaffey there from SOVA, which is a very prominent higher education consultancy firm. We also invited a whole host of philanthropy organizations, and you can see the very generous things that they said about the event. It is the case, as we hoped, that on the one hand, we brought them there because we were excited to share the event, but we also brought them there because we wanted them to know the extraordinary work which is happening in Louisiana. Louisiana's been a well-kept secret for far too long, and so we wanted to make sure that people who have that kind of national exposure could come here and see the wonderful work that our campuses are doing and the wonderful work that's happening here in the state. What I'm happy to say is that strategy is working, that we, as part of last year's event and this year's event, have been able to rally behind the work that our campuses are doing. A number of national organizations. You can see there Complete College America, SHEO, the State Higher Education Executive Officers Group, Strong Start to Finish, the Lumina Foundation, and Strata Educational Foundation. Complete College America has partnered with our institutions as part of a program that they call Accelerate. That Accelerate is providing technical assistance and support to all of the southern system, to the regional schools in the LSU system, and also to 3 of our community colleges to enable them to put in place the kinds of strategies that the Momentum Framework asks for. SHEO is partnering actually with SOBA to provide a program called PASS. That PASS program is supporting all of the chief academic officers in the LCTCS system. So all of them are going through a year-long support structure to enable them to get training exactly around implementing student success and completion. Strong Start to Finish, you might remember about 6 months ago, we were able to get a $250,000 award to really support us as we implement our co-requisite strategies. And so again, Strong Start has been a very generous supporter of that work. The other 2 organizations I'm very happy to share with you have provided a little bit more than $1 million in funding to our campuses to be able to do and carry on this work. So Strata, actually Ruth Watkins at Strata was able to make this announcement at the event. So this is a $400,000 award to partner with our campuses to really try to accelerate work-based learning, to enable 20 campuses, 20 programs across our state to deliberately incorporate work-based learning into the curriculum. Not a sort of a random act of work-based learning, which might be great, but instead one that actually satisfies curricular requirements for that program and is intentionally built into the structure of the program. Lumina is very generously supporting us with 2 programs. One, which supports, some of you remember the project that we're undertaking to promote admissions across our state, to enable students who might actually have already satisfied all the requirements for graduation, as Regent Pryor was talking about earlier, to actually know that. Because there's plenty of students across our state, they just don't know what those criteria are, and so they're unaware of the fact that they already qualify to go to a 4-year institution. They just didn't know that. And so that and a whole host of other parts of that is that $300,000 Great Admissions Redesign Challenge. And then just last week, we heard of this $330,000 award to create Momentum Scholars. So these will be faculty champions across all of our campuses, really to try to take the work that we're doing through the Momentum Framework and take it down into the faculty ranks and really create communities of practice at every campus to further this work. So we're really thankful for the very generous support of all of these groups, because the reality is it really is taking a village to support all of the work that's happening across our campuses. I'm hopeful that this will not be the last time that I get to share this kind of good news, but for now, this is really good news to share. Just a couple more things that I wanted to tell you about today. The first, I alluded to the fact that we were scaling up co-requisite remediation. Some of you might remember that this was work that we undertook or began. Well, we began a long time ago, but we actually began to do that full implementation in 2022. In math, we scaled up co-requisite this fall for the very first time across the entire state, every public institution. And you can see the impact that it's had. But this is, what I'm showing you is the proportion of students who begin in developmental education throughout the years and have passed a credit-bearing math class within that first academic year. You can see going back to 2017, that was 14%. So 14% of the students who arrived on campus and started out in developmental education ever passed a credit-bearing math class, the math class that, of course, they needed to graduate. Well, I don't know about you, but I would much rather look at the other end of the chart where now 14 has already turned into 47, and that's just one semester's of data, right? We got all of this semester too. Hopefully that 47 will increase even to an even greater number, but still 47 as compared to 14, it's a remarkable change and a huge, again, an enormous thank you to all of the faculty and administrators across all of our campuses that have worked so hard to put this in place. English will scale this coming fall, and so hopefully this time next year I'll be able to share you the good news about English as well. And then the last slide I want to show you, and again this has been alluded to a couple of times, but I really want to make sure that we kind of drink in the import of this. We have shared this 60% goal, and we all know that this is our North Star, and that 60% goal is for our 25 through 64-year-olds across the entire state. Very exciting news for us to see that that attainment goal that we have right now, we're at 49.5, and you know that that is our best that we've ever had in our state. But this is, I think, at least as exciting, that when we look at the younger part of our population, and I mean the reality is we all know that to move that needle for people in their late 40s, 50s, 60s, it's going to be hard to move that needle significantly with that population. So instead, this is the leading indicator. This is where it is that we're headed. And so you can see that for that population, 25 through 34-year-olds, that attainment level is already better. It's already at 51.5%, but I think at least as exciting. I mean, the little competition between states is always good, right? That we can see that we actually are outperforming in our attainment levels all of our regional states. And just to hammer this home, I know there's been a lot of conversation about whether people who graduate stay. This is the proportion of people who live in our state who have attained this. There are, of course, more people who have earned credentials and chosen to leave. This is the proportion of people who earned credentials and live and work and stay here in Louisiana. So I think it's really exciting, and again, a big testimony to the vision of this board in setting out that goal in 2019 as you did. But it's also important for us to know the work that's ahead, because 51.5 is not 60, and so we want to make sure that it sure enough gets there. So, Mr. Chair, that's my report.
Tristan, thank you so much. Really amazing work on that summit, by the way. We're so pleased to see the foundation support that's being provided nationally to support this work. I had a chance after the summit to have dinner with some of the national foundation leaders who were here for the summit, and I asked them, I was like, what are you doing here for our little summit? And they said that there are no other states doing things quite like this, that they really see us as a standout in that way. And I had to pull up on the iPad the quote that was on the screen from George Mahaffey. I'm going to read it because it speaks volumes. He said, I think the Momentum Initiative is the most comprehensive, well-articulated, and well-executed statewide effort in student success that exists anywhere in the country. So congratulations on all the great work there. I'm so impressed with this work. Really well done. Folks, we're going to move on now to the committee reports and recommendations. We'll take those together, as former Chairman Temple would say, in globo. However, if any member wants to, I'm not letting it die just because I've got the gavel now. However, if any board member wants to take up any of these reports separately, let me know. We can consider them individually. Is there anyone who does want to take up any of the committee reports separately today? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve all committee recommendations from today's committee meetings in globo? So moved by Regent Weil and second by Regent Temple. Any discussion? Any questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Commissioner Reed, we're passing the mic to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, members. I just want to say how exciting it is to see amazing system change happening at scale, as Tristan and others have shared, from the dual enrollment conversation, 32,000 and growing, to the co-requisite discussion that Tristan talked about, and of course the Momentum Summit, having national experts come and talk about the value of the work, but also send money to support the work and keep it going, I think speaks volume to the talent that we have at this Board of Regents in this state, and so proud of that. I want to echo the chair's comments about yesterday, the trusteeship conference, really meaningful conversation, amazing reception as well. And thanks to the staff that worked so hard on that, and so many events that we are putting on as we celebrate our golden year. I think they're exhausted already, and we're not even to near December. So I'll hit a few items that we're excited about. So first of all, we had our dual enrollment event. We launched the state plan or state report in Lake Charles at the Lake Charles Boston Academy, because they have the VIP program that Susanna was talking about, where all the high schools are on the same bell schedule, an opportunity to really ensure best and brightest in dual enrollment are teaching all sorts of courses to students. And so we're happy to have that opportunity, and thanks to Sam Gill, who attended since we were in his backyard for that event. We also had an opportunity to go to Donaldsonville High School. This model represents the CTE aspiration we have. So River Parish Community College is co-located in Donaldsonville High School. They're offering instrumentation courses, as well as welding and process technology. So the high school students can participate in the day, the adults can participate in the evening. I cannot tell you how many people were at this event. The mayor, the sheriff, the school board, the parish president, the business and industry, everybody was there to celebrate this amazing work, and so we're just excited to be a part of that. This month, as you know, is Women's Month, Women's History Month, and certainly Women in STEM. So I want to mention 3 fantastic events that I had an opportunity to participate in. The two-lane, top right, the two-lane Girls in STEM event was for 5th to 7th grade girls to meet with undergraduate, graduate, and faculty to talk about and learn about STEM activities, so they can continue to see that as a potential career for them. So that was really fun. The large photo with the middle school children in white lab coats. It was my first time attending a white lab coat event for middle schoolers. So these students were completing their aquaponics program. So they're raising catfish. The byproducts of the catfish are raising lettuce at their school. And so they're learning about science and food safety and sustainability. And so it was an amazing opportunity to do that as well. My first time going to that. And then GNO Inc. and UNO co-sponsored at the bottom right an event for girls in STEM, where we had an opportunity for the students to meet the female engineering dean, the UNO president, and another female faculty member, and 2 students who were majoring in STEM, 2 female students. So it was for 8th graders, and really had a great time. It's important for girls to see themselves in the leadership that is doing phenomenal STEM work. And so I'm happy that we have an opportunity to participate in and see this work happening across the state. And then finally, because you know we love promoting literacy and we love little people, I have to thank the staff, but especially Dr. Susanna Craig, for creating this amazing Reading Across America Day as we celebrate Dr. Seuss. So we had an opportunity to go to Jefferson Terrace Academy, and I read to pre-K through 3rd graders. Dr. Craig's husband is a special ed teacher there, so we knew the school we had to go to, the school where Stuart Craig is teaching. So we did 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish. The little ones had a great time. They all left with a book, a bookmark, a pencil, and a big smile or a hug from a Regent staffer who was there to celebrate literacy with those students. So with all of that, Mr. Chair, just very proud of this great staff and this great work, and I'll return the microphone to you.
Thank you so much. Great work to you and to the staff. Y'all continue to do very impressive work. Is there any other business to come before this board?
No business, just a comment. I want to reiterate my concern and see how we could help those systems as we go through the legislative process on the budget. If there are some peer kind of conversations that they could have to look at ways how they can reduce cost or really just try to adjust and deal with some of these impacts, I certainly would love to even be a part of those conversations, Matthew or whoever is going to be working with those institutions. I just see that if there's no new money coming, it's really going to be tough on them. But just as a follow-up, an update on the Grambling Library. It doesn't have to be at a board meeting, but it's something that's a little bit more formal than a phone call would be appreciative. And in the minutes, I saw that campus crime, that $10 million, I would like to know the spreadsheet as to how those $10 million was allocated across the various institutions. Thank you.
Regent Aubrey, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions?
I want to welcome our new member.
Yes, indeed, welcome our new member. So at the break, I'll have one. I'm going to ask Vice Chair Seal to chime in with me here. At the break, Regent Seal and I were talking, and he had a very, what I think is a very good idea to better connect this board to the current developments that are so rapid with AI and how that impacts higher ed in this state and beyond. Regent Seal, would you mind sharing a moment just kind of what you and I had discussed and maybe some suggestions for next steps for our future meetings?
The concept is that this board needs to become fully cognizant of the importance of AI as a phenomenon in higher education and as a phenomenon in business and in society. And one way we might be able to do that would be to form a standing committee of the Board of Regents and to include on our agenda for every monthly report an AI presentation, perhaps with a handout as well, just a one-page handout that would be a poop sheet of knowledge that people could use and keep. It would help us learn what it is that higher education and really education at every level is dealing with, and so are the workplaces in our state dealing with the expansion of AI. We don't need to be the last people in Louisiana to understand the significance of this incredible change that's going on around us. So, Mr. Chairman, my recommendation would be that we create a standing committee to address this.
Regent Seal, what I'd like to see this board do, and I'm going to volunteer our commissioner, I'm going to volunteer perhaps Tristan Denley, maybe in our next meeting to make a presentation back to us about the broad concept of AI, how it's playing out in our institutions in this state, and what national education support foundations or education support groups are doing at scale to maybe better advise as to what this board can focus on within the role and scope and mission of the Board of Regents. And so I think that's a great idea, Regent Seal, and I'd ask for Kim and Tristan perhaps in our next meeting to present a special topic on this. Are there any questions about this? I see Regent Sterling has a comment.
Not a question, but a comment, I guess. To inventory across our institutions, who are our experts? You know, who's kind of leading for us and who are experts? And then, because if we don't have, then that really brings the question of how do we go out and get some, like, where do we put a center for artificial intelligence if that's, as we see this transitioning? So I just want to understand where we have expertise or where we may have gaps.
Regent Sterling, that's great. And we were just piggybacking on your comment, thinking that maybe Kim can also, in addition to inventorying who's out there, maybe we think about trying to gather that expertise in one way, in some way, to really advance this work. So it's not just us, but it's our consortium of our partners around the state.
Chairman Solomon, if I
Yes,
could
Regent
just,
Finley.
for the record, I believe Regent Seal mentioned poop sheet. For those who did not go to law school, that is a term from law school. That just means an outline with a summary.
Handed down from generation to generation. Thank you.
I was going to consult my Regent Seal glossary for that one. Thank you, Regent Seal. Any other comments or questions from this board? Commissioner.
Sorry, I missed my Southern hospitality here. So I want to introduce two people quickly in the audience. First one will be embarrassed that I mentioned him, Blair LeBlanc. Raise your hand, Blair. Blair is the budget analyst from the House Fiscal Office. He has the responsibility of providing historical trend information to all of the House Appropriations members about our budget. And I think he's the only one I've known in the years I've been here who actually comes to the meeting, sits in the back, listens to the discussion, and we appreciate Blair. And Blair, if that helps us get a little bit more money in the budget, all the better. And then I want to introduce a successful LSU PhD student, Vicki Silas, who's about to be Dr. Vicki Silas. She's Deputy Chief of Policy for EBR Schools, and she has been doing her PhD dissertation on minority women in education policy. So she interviewed me for her project and then asked if she could job shadow. So I said, why don't you come to a board meeting and spend the day and you can see the policy conversation in action. So welcome and thank you for being with us as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Well, members, is there any public comment, Doreen, that we need to acknowledge? Nope. Hearing none. Members, we've had a lively meeting. We've covered all sorts of topics. I see us all volunteering to get more involved in many ways and evolving this agenda constantly to meet the needs of our state. Is there a motion to adjourn? I see a motion from Regent Sterling, a second from, did I see Regent Cordell make her first second? All right. She said, get me out of here. Any discussion or any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed saying nay. Motion passes. We're adjourned. Thank you.